feels the Astronomicon falter for a breath, a million ships casting for his light. He calculates the fault line through the immaterium and finds a parallel terror where faith is raw and unshaped. He chooses to cut a new path, to test whether unbound humanity can be shepherded without chains. He binds a shard of his will into prepared flesh and warns the custodies that the light will dim. He speaks the geometry of kings and breaches the skin of a sky he has never seen. Dawn over Manhattan takes on a second sun. The new light is not in the east, but above the Hudson. A vertical blade of brilliance sawn through cloud, its teeth singing. The river stiffens, as if a hand presses flat on open water. Ferry slew. Wind bends in concentric rings around an empty point that is no longer empty. A bike courier skids out on Broadway, rubber barking on paint. He looks up from between yellow cabs and sees a silhouette inside the tear. His mind supplies a word his life has not prepared him for. Emperor. He laughs once because the word feels too heavy in his mouth. In the Tower Canyon, glass murmurs against its frames. A helicopter on approach to a midtown helipad shivers, instruments ghosting. Its pilot swears into the headset and fights a drift the air no longer agrees to have. Then the drift stops because a hand bigger than a man's chest holds the air still around the machine, not touching it, simply deciding. He steps from the wound and onto nothing. The golden figure weighs everything and nothing. The city hums like a tuning fork. Heat comes off him in a low tide. He descends one story at a time, not flying, merely choosing lower. Tracon, to all aircraft, hold at present altitude and heading. Stand by for ground stop, a controller says into two mics at once. His screens display velocities that do not match the math. The labels on each track are offset by a single pixel, as though space has hiccuped. In a classroom in Harlem, a 7-year-old freezes with a crayon in the air. She watches sunlight move along the wall and sees it bend around something no one else can see. Later, she will draw a man with a sun for a face and 4 lines for a crown. An FDNY ladder company rolls out from Liberty Street. Captain Rivera lifts his eyes from the checklist and swears soft in a way that counts as prayer. Whatever this is, we're going to get crushed calls, he says. His driver nods and touches the steering wheel like a relic. He touches down in Bryant Park, and the grass crisps to a lighter green under his boots. Every blade stands straighter. His armor is not metal, but the idea of metal, engraved with histories no one here has written. A cloak of night captured and picked with stars as if by needles. Eyes meet his, and some people drop to their knees without knowing why, as if their spines know ancient etiquette their minds have never learned. Sound comes back to the city in layers. Honks, shouts, a low collective exhale. The Emperor breathes once. He feels the anchor threads yank tight across the void. On the other side of eternity, 10,000 psychers on terror stiffen on their thrones and continue to die for a different reason than yesterday. The helicopter above loses a blade of fear. He turns his head, and air obeys. The machine settles like a bird coaxed into a hand and lands gentle with its skids, a whisper on the roof. No one in the cockpit understands how they went from fighting to floating. They will tell this story over plastic coffee cups for the rest of their lives. "Sir," says a woman with a windbreaker marked NYC Emergency Management, breath clouding the last of the morning chill. She approaches, hands out from her sides, palms empty of threat. Her eyes take him in and reject nothing. "I'm Commissioner Elena Park. If you can understand me, I need to coordinate. We're getting distress across every borough. Are you?" She stops before the word God can embarrass both of them. "I am the Emperor," he says, voice low enough to smooth panic, but not so low that the people nearby must strain. I am here to keep your species alive. His words are not a language, but everyone who hears them understands them. It is unfair to expect otherwise. The air behind each word thickens with meaning and deposits it into the nearest human brain with the quiet competence of a postman. Agent Naya Sengupta steps out from a black SUV on 42nd. DHS Anomalous Threats Unit reads the patch that no one was supposed to notice. She wears a hard look and a collar microphone and an earpiece that buzzes with bureaucratic adrenaline. Containment protocol, she murmurs into her sleeve. Level unknown, aura unknown, humanoid with energy output off the charts, possible memetic field, standoff perimeter 50 yards, non-lethals only. Father Gabriel Marchesi arrives on foot from St. Patrick's Itis, running in the way old men run when the world turns and they need to be where it turns. He wears a plain black coat and a small wooden cross polished by a lifetime of thumb. He stops at the park edge and looks at the golden stranger and forgets to cross himself. Tears gather and make his eyes sting, both from the light and because he knows there is something under the light that is not simple. Elena Park takes a breath she will remember. Sir, Emperor, can you keep doing that? She gestures up, where the helicopter no longer threatens to fold into a street. People are panicking. If this is from you, they'll listen if you tell them to stay calm. I can do what is required, he says. He lifts a hand. Sound drops out. Not silence. The city still roars, but the roar is behind a pane of glass. In that glass, the reflection of his hand makes a second sun. He turns the wrist a degree. Traffic along 6th and 5th slows without brakes. Brains stop manufacturing fear. Adrenaline pauses in its syringes. A stampede at the corner turns into a clump of people who become embarrassed at their own running. 100 phones stop streaming and start recording. Cost moves through him like winter through joints that remember old wounds. He lets it. Across the abyss, choir throats bleed. A line of lights on the Golden Throne's heart screen flickers one bar lower. The custodians lean closer without lifting their feet and say nothing. Thank you, Elena says. Something human in her voice despite the radio stacked with open channels at her hip. We have to get you under a roof, or at least under a plan. People will want to. They'll want to know what you are. I am what I said, he says. Agent Sengupta angles in. Sir, I don't know what you are, but whatever field you're generating is interfering with FAA radars and our SATCOM. If you can power down, I am not a machine to switch, he says, and he turns his head slightly toward her. Your uniforms tell me you intend to contain me. That is wise. You cannot. Father Marchesi moves closer and bows his head. Can you hear me? He asks, but the words are not his. He does not know whose words they are. Do you answer to a church? I answer to mankind, he says. Do you? All three of them are quiet, because there is no good reply that fits on a clipboard. A billboard above Times Square glitches. A toothpaste ad spills its white stripe in a way that should not move. Letters crawl against the grain. The anchors of breakfast shows turn their heads in unison and smile too widely, and then blur into blue fire. Every ad flips to the same thing at once, not an image but a grammar. Shapes repeat at useful intervals. The human eye cannot help but read it aloud, even if the mouth does not move. People begin to hum. The hum is tuneless and still matches. The Emperor looks toward the square. The wind vanishes between his armor plates. Then it comes back and pours. You have not bred yourselves free of temptation, he says softly. Good. Freedom does not grow in sterile soil. What is that? Elna says, hand already on her radio. Not ours, Agent Sengupta says, as if naming something makes it smaller. Rolling blackout for Times Square. Kill feeds now. PD, ESU. Block access to 7th, from 41st through 48th. Repeat. Block access. She says it into the wrong century. The screens are not on a grid you can trip with a switch. They are on a grid of attention and habit and capital. The square gathers blue like oil in a bowl. The first thing steps through the angle of a smiling mouth. It is not large. It is wrong and amused that it is wrong. The Emperor knows the patron as a man knows the taste of salt. Tzeentch sends a greeting card to a world it has not visited yet. Back, he tells them, and walks. He does not stride. He is present. Each of his steps lands where it must, somewhere far from here. Something old that hates him counts those steps and hopes he will misplace one. The first blue horror takes a selfie with a dead phone. The second eats a traffic cone and becomes a worse idea of itself. People laugh in a way that means they have no space to be afraid. Their laughter smells like an open can of paint. He lifts a hand. The air behaves as if gravity is a rumor it no longer respects. The horror grins cheeks to ears and reaches, but its arm cannot remember that reaching is linear. It folds into a loop and hands itself back a hand. The Emperor closes his fist. The loop collapses into ash that tastes of copper. The second one spits a ribbon of equation into a police barricade. The steel forgets it is steel and becomes a line. The line wraps a man around a thought, and the thought twitches. The Emperor's attention cuts the line in two and gives the man back to distance and weight. Codex note. Regnant proxy. An incarnate shard driven from the golden throne through the webway. Every minute sustained consumes choir lives and drains the Astronomican signal. Blue fire whispers. The whisper is of bargains. It is always bargains with the changer. Give me your uncertainty, and I will give it back polished. The Emperor does not bargain. He spreads his fingers, and the blue fire sifts like flour. It could be grand. He could make a sun of his hand and press it into the square. He does not. He respects collateral. Mirrors shatter without noise. Glass falls in slow thought, each piece deciding whether to be a blade today. He wills it to be sand instead. Pedestrians close their eyes and grit powders their lashes. They will blink for hours and think of the beach. Is this contained to times? Elena asks into a handheld that hates her now. Feedback sings an alphabet she never learned. Her operators report identical symbol storms on building lobby screens, on a city by kiosk, on the news crawl. The city is a sigil. Mom, NSA here, a new voice says through a private line that should be reliable. We're seeing memetic payloads riding ad networks. Fiber carriers registering error strings we can't pass. Also, we don't have language for this. Does your acid know what he's doing? He knows more than we do, she says. We're following his lead. For once, let New York follow someone wearing a cape. Not a cape, Agent Sengupta says on reflex. A cloak. Father Marchesi walks beside the Emperor, and then half a pace behind, because etiquette can survive a millennium. This is sorcery, he says. This is a petty god-scratching test marks into a world far from its lair, the Emperor says. You have no lair for them to anchor to. That keeps you alive for now. That and massed human will. Do not mistake novelty for invulnerability. An NYPD ESU team arrives in body armor that is comforting because it looks like action. Their sergeant, stoic and square, angles his men behind a truck. Beanbag and OC ready, he tells his line. He peers around the panel at a thing with 6 jaws, making a smile out of a melted mannequin. Ah, hell, he says, and adjusts nothing in his expression. The Emperor raises his other hand, points 2 fingers down. You will not fire, he tells them without looking. They will feast on your intent. Copy that, the sergeant says automatically, because the voice is the voice of every order he has ever obeyed. Only later will he ask himself why he obeyed a stranger. He will decide it is because the stranger was right, and he will sleep better. The square becomes a rookery. Horrors bud and visions slapstick into carnage. People who look too long find their tongues writing in the air like pens. A woman kneels over her baby in a stroller and hums a song from a cartoon, and the song refuses to corrupt. For one beat, the Emperor's face turns toward the child, and something in him that is older than strategy bows. He pulls a line out of the sky. It is thin as music. He lays it along the seams of the square and draws it tight. Every screen that was a door becomes a mirror again. The reflections are not accurate. He does not mind. Accuracy is not the same as truth. The blue fire sulks. A thing with too many elbows folds itself into a banner and flaps twice and is gone. The smell of ozone and pennies relaxes into city air. Diesel and sugar and hot steel cooling. He does not display triumph. He scans. His head tilts a fraction. The breach, his breach, echoes itself inside this city through the least sacred cathedral. The grid. Your ads, he says to Elena. Your data, your symbols. They are a liturgy. They can be inverted. Agent Sengupta gestures at a light pole as if it is to blame. You're telling us our infrastructure is a magical circle. I am telling you thought moves on wires just as it moves between faces, he says. And your city is built to concentrate thought. So we kill power, Elena says. Islands, block by block. If we cut Manhattan, we take hospitals offline. Backups will hold for hours, Agent Sengupta says. We can isolate the feeders into Times, Midtown, Feedy, Soho, Inn. God, 10 minutes if Con Ed cooperates. Con Ed will not cooperate in 10 minutes. Then you persuade them, Elena says, cutting, and the radio at her hip starts to earn its keep. Con Ed control, Midtown control, this is Park. Emergency authority request is inbound. Isolate Times Square feeders and screens to dark. I know, do it anyway. We'll eat the fines. FEMA, she adds, already moving, even though she has no authority over FEMA and never has. FEMA is listening, a voice says, and we will pretend you didn't ask us to do something we cannot legally do if you pretend we didn't agree. The Emperor moves his hands apart like a man easing a knot. The knot is Manhattan. He cannot yank. If he yanks, the knot cuts through people. He eases. The square exhales a word that is not English and was still born here. It means relief. On the river, a ferry that would have hit its own wake rides smooth. He points. The pilot feels like a hand pushes him toward the right pier. He ties off with shaking fingers and will never complain about tourists again. On a subway, the E-line breaks in the tunnel between 50th and 5th. A conductor flicks switches that do nothing and hears his own heart bang. The Emperor looks down and sees concrete, and in the concrete sees rebar, and in the rebar sees the math of stress. He says no. The tunnel accepts it. The train waits without moving, like a child sitting still because an adult asked nicely. He could hold this city together without asking. He does not. It costs less if they help him. Who are you to this world? Father Marchesi asks, voice a paper cut soft and sharp. I am what you will make me, he says, and for a beat the admission hurts him more than the drain. But I am also what I make of you. On the south tip, tourists point up from Battery Park and see an aurora in daylight. Bands of green and gold folding like ribbon candy. A ranger tells them to move back from the water, and his finger shakes. Across the bridge in Brooklyn, a woman lights a candle in a storefront church and feels foolish and keeps doing it. In Queens, a deli radio pops and hisses and then plays the hymn no one tuned in. Elena keeps moving. She is good at moving. We need a working group now, she says. Emperor, sir, can you stay put long enough to build a plan? Plan now, Agent Sengupta says into the new quiet. We can ride his wake, but we need to do this with limbs we understand. Inside, Father Marchesi suggests, glancing toward the library steps. Words carry further under a roof, and people will stop thinking this is a parade. He nods once. He could hold council in the air, but roofs are rituals in themselves. He walks with them into the New York Public Library, past lions who have watched wars they did not join, into marble that believes in itself. Inside, air goes from holy to simply expensive. They stop under a ceiling painted to look like sky, and the joke is kind and lands. Phones still refuse the internet and accept the camera. A line forms outside without someone making the line form. Order is a contagion too. They stand in a rough circle. Elena, Agent Sengupta, Father Marchesi. 2 NYPD lieutenants join. A Con Edison supervisor who looks like sleep is a rumor he once heard. A Port Authority official who wears grief for people he never met. A colonel in civilian clothes who forgot to take off the way he stands. This is the part where I tell you what this is not, the Emperor says. It is not the end. It is not punishment. It is a test I did not write. What is it? Elena asks. It is your city teaching itself how to sing the wrong song, he says. And a predator who likes wrong songs trying the door with a finger. The door holds. For now. Why is the door here? Agent Sengupta asks. Because I made a path, he says, and for the first time his voice admits cost. The marble underfoot registers a hairline crack and forgets it. Paths invite travelers. I will close it when I can. While it is open, you must learn to hold your own thresholds. This is going to spread, the Con Ed supervisor says. His words are plain like a wrench. Our feeds are one body. If they've got times, they've got Midtown in an hour. Unless we cut times like a tourniquet, Elena says. And the Con Ed man nods even as his soul resists everything that word is not. Even if you cut, the pattern will look for other organs, the Emperor says. Phones, windows, faces. You cannot cut your way to safety alone. We can tell people not to look, a lieutenant says, and hears himself and knows it is stupid. The city is built to look. You can tell them what to look at, Father Marchesi says, surprising himself. You can give them a right song. We can own the message. Agent Sengupta translates into her language. A unified feed. Push a counter pattern. Government, city, faith, all the screens. Some of the screens belong to people who sue when you breathe, Elena says. We will worry about the lawsuits if we're alive. The colonel tilts his head. Northcom will say scramble fighters, he says. We don't know what to shoot. Don't shoot the sky, the Emperor says. If you must fire, fire at the things with teeth. But you will find that attention is a more effective weapon here. He closes his eyes. The room believes he is praying. He is not. He is counting lives on terror and calculating what he can spend. He will not spend them all. He will not spend them as if they are coins. Plan, Eleanor says, writing in a notebook, because pens are more honest today than screens. 1. Con Ed isolates times in Midtown. 2. We push a clean message to every device we can reach. Calm, simple, repetitive. 3. NYPD holds perimeters and enables egress. 4. FTNY triage stations at the edges. 5. Houses of worship open doors and run quiet rooms. 6. The library stays open. People trust rooms with books. 7. Agent Sengupta says. We stand up an interagency joint cell here. Emperor, sir, what do you need? A map, he says, of the wires beneath, of light, of habit. The map you think you use is not adequate. The colonel coughs the way men cough before blasphemy. We have a city fiber map, he says. You didn't see it. I didn't say it. But we have it. Bring it, Elena says. We'll sin together. He turns his head sharply. A soundless shock passes through him like a wave hitting pilings. The light in the room dims by nothing you can measure. Outside, someone screams at nothing you can see, and then stops. Now, he says. Now it tries a bigger door. They follow him out. The lions still watch. The sky has bent east and west. Above One World Trade, a spiral opens as wide as the building's taper. It is elegant. That is the worst part. It is a door designed by a god who admires doors more than what lives behind them. I need to stand beneath that, he says. You'll draw it, Agent Sengupta says. I will teach it who it is trying to uncrown, he says. Elena feels fear choose her spine and opt out. We'll clear the route, she says. Brooklyn Bridge or West Side. Water remembers better than roads, Father Marchesi says without thinking. Take the river. They go toward the river. The city moves around them like muscle around a thrown spear. Helicopters orbit and refuse to close. Horns argue less. Somewhere, electricity learns how to obey. A small boy in a Captain America t-shirt stares up from a stroller and holds his mother's finger. He watches the golden man and does not cry. The Emperor looks at the boy and sees a species that has survived not because of gods, but because of handholds. At the West Side Highway, a line of ESU trucks parts. Officers look and find their breaths. The Hudson lies flat, a long brown mirror. The spiral above One World pulses with appetite. Blue light crawls like ink under skin. Con Ed, Elena says into a radio. Dal has decided to be useful. Kill the feeds into feed E in 3, 2, 1. Do it ugly if you have to. Doing it ugly, a voice says. And entire blocks fall back into the 19th century. Room by room, the city remembers candles. The Emperor steps onto the river. The water thinks about whether to bear him and decides yes. He walks toward the foot of the tower that calls the gods. The spiral leans. Is it you? Agent Sengupta asks. Father Marchesi. Eyes on the spiral but a voice for the priest. Do you believe this is good? I believe he is not a lie, the priest says. And I believe lies heard when the truth walks into the room. She nods. It will do. Halfway along the reflected sky, he pauses. He looks at the building and its wound. He measures the cut he must make in himself to close it. His face does not change. It would comfort people if it did. He does not do that. Behind his eyes, the golden throne ticks. The custodies look at each other without moving. A servitor counts down numbers that are not seconds but lives per minute. An ecclesiarch whispers a prayer to a god who is a man who refuses to be a god. He lifts both hands. They weigh down the spiral like a barbell. Blue flame swims against him. The flame is thought. He catches it in his fingers and lets it taste him. It recoils. It has tasted him before across darker eons and prefers easier prey. He speaks a word he built before your species found fire. The word is not for demons. It is for doors. The door hears it and thinks about its hinges. Above the tower, the spiral slackens. It does not close. It pauses because moving is no longer the default. The pause is the first victory. The second will cost more. On the promenade, a jogger stops and puts hands on his knees and weeps because the world has become too wide. A trader in a cheap suit looks at his dead phone and laughs like a man who has been fired in a fire. A cop adjusts his vest and thinks about his daughter. Eleanor stands with her people and grips her radio like a hand. We have a plan, she says, borrowing conviction and making it real. We cut the feeds. We flood the city with our song. We move people like organs. And we let him do the part we cannot. Agent Sengupta watches the golden figure hold the sky like a lid on a pot and feels her career bend. We also write the rules, she says quietly, because if he stays, he needs them. And if he leaves, we need them more. Father Marchesi does what he can do. He prays, which means he chooses a shape for his hope and gives it words. The spiral twitches, offended by effort. It sends something down that is not a creature and is still dangerous, a lace of intent braided until it cuts. It aims at the golden figure's skull. He lets it hit. He opens himself to it so he can measure how it hurts. Pain writes a line from his brow to the back of his mind. It is a clean wound, the kind you can teach. He files it away. He will show his enemies this notch later, and they will learn what it is to educate a god. On a northbounder train stalled in the dark, a nurse named Layla grips a pole and tells a car full of strangers they will be fine. They decide she is telling the truth. They sit. They share mints and bottled water and bad jokes that are not jokes at all. He lowers his hands. The spiral keeps listening. The city keeps breathing. He looks at the tower and sees a place to stand. He will need to stand there later with others beside him. Behind his eyes, Kos scratches tally marks. He can pay. He will pay. He will decide how much he can never get back. Outside the library, the first draft of a war council assembles without calling itself that. Elena writes tasks on paper as if ink is a spell. Agent Sengupta builds a tree of boxes in her mind. Father Marchesi calls rectors and rabbis and imams with words that do not require dogma to function. The colonel calls a command he is not supposed to have and asks not for soldiers but for a map. The first day in New York, the Emperor of Mankind chooses to be precise. He will not torch. He will cut. He will ask. He will lay his hand on the city like a surgeon who knows the body wants to live. In the cold shadow of the tower, the door waits and learns. The god behind it changes a plan it has held for 10,000 years because a variable came into play that it respects and hates. He turns back from the water and walks towards the land that holds him up because it loves the idea of itself. The crowd parts. No one quite cheers. The throat is not ready for that yet. He nods once to Elena, as if to say, "You have the next move." She nods back because she does. The first clean note comes from a girl in Harlem who hums without knowing why. It settles into the city like a coin into a well. The emperor hears it and makes a shape with 2 fingers, as if pinching a thread. The thread is there because she is. He draws it across the island. Church bells answer in different metals. Some are tuned to grief, some to weddings long past. Muezzins lift voices from rooftops. Shofars in a synagogue storage closet find hands. A Sikh Gurdwara slides open his doors and pours tabla in soft thunder onto the street. Sirens hold back by command and then join, less wail than pulse, locked to a human resting heart. Screens blink from blue to black, then to white with a single line that undulates at 60 beats per minute. It is not a heartbeat drawn by a machine. It is movement taught to machines by humans who breathe. The city breathes to it. Con Ed confirms times is dark, Helena says, pencil blunt from use. Midtown is in a rolling brownout. We bought ourselves an hour. We'll need less, Agent Sengupta says, because saying it makes it true long enough to try. The Emperor's hands do not glow. They annotate. He lays invisible lines between buildings like braces on a tooth line. The lines do not hold the city in place. They hold meaning in place, so it cannot be snatched by blue jokes that want to rewrite nouns. People look away from the seduction of wrong geometry and toward each other, because a pattern invites them to. Where the first horrors linger, they begin to dissolve the way fog dissolves around street lamps. A talon thing that learned to be a headline collapses into paper ash. A distortion that ate a traffic cone and called it wisdom spits out the cone dented and ugly, and then is not there. In the shadow of one world trade, the spiral stutters. It tries to remain elegant and cannot. A sloppy edge appears where it meets the sky, as if a paintbrush ran dry. The Emperor lifts his chin at that edge like a duelist noting a wrist. He presses very little. He presses enough. Control collateral, he insists. Windows craze and then refuse to release shards. Power dies in neighborhoods where dying power is survivable. Elevators pause on floors with doors. Subway trains hold in stations, not tunnels. A million inconveniences bloom so that blood does not. Across the river, a hospital powers a wing with a generator that had not been tested in 3 years. It runs. An ICU nurse named Mateo mouths "thank you" to no one and keeps working. Children hum. Their parents hush them and then stop hushing when they recognize the tune they never learned. The tune gives them something to do with their throats that is not screaming. The Emperor stands at the promenade and draws the last line that shuts the spiral to a peephole. The peephole is stubborn. The god behind it is patient. He will not spend lives to erase it. He will amortize it across courage. Applause tries to start and does not. The crowd shapes relief into silence. In that silence, radio nets get less frantic and more precise. First wave contained, Agent Sengupta says into the joint channel. We're not calling it over. It's a pause. Treat it as a pause. Elena nods, hair loose in the small wind that persists by choice. Move to second posture, she tells the city, as if it is a single responder. Quiet rooms open. Houses of worship on flood. Libraries full staff. NYPD perimeter to soft presence. We're going to let people sit. He walks back toward Bryant Park through streets that decide to be streets again. Father Marchesi falls in beside him and studies the set of his jaw as if reading weather. You did that gently, he says. I did that with respect, the Emperor says. Your city wants to live. That is an asset. Do not squander it. In the Rose Main reading room, they set a table of maps. Fiber routes in one color, water mains in another, electrical arteries in another. It is a circulatory system, imperfect and proud. The Colonel lays down an overlay that should not exist and this time does not apologize. Backbone fiber, he says. Some of this is wrong by design. It's still better than guessing. If they ride attention and bandwidth, these are the veins. Then we tourniquet where we can, Elena says. And we pump meaning through redundancies, print, voice, bells, bodies. Agent Sengupta threads their hard edges with law. We need legal scaffolding, she says. Emergency orders to requisition private signage and ad servers. Consent where possible. If we do this by force, we train the city to flinch from its own government. If we ask, we might get more than we demand. People will ask who is in charge, the Port Authority official says. They will not like hearing everyone a little. Then tell them the truth, the Emperor says. It is a good day to practice. A beat of quiet is not quite reverence. Elena breaks it. All right, she says, and writes in her notebook, as if stone tablets have not improved in 3,000 years. Command relationships. City leads civil posture. DHS runs anomaly intelligence. Port Authority coordinates transit flows. Con Ed adheres to this map, not the one with shareholder comfort. Houses of worship act as morale multipliers. The Emperor acts as, what? Strategic reserve, anchor. We need a word people recognize that does not build a religion overnight. Steward, Father Marchesi suggests, surprising himself. We call him Steward. The Emperor does not flinch at the demotion. Acceptable, he says, but right conditions under it. Conditions, Agent Sengupta says without a smile because humor would cheapen this. I am not obeyed because I am bright, he says. I am obeyed because my acts serve your stated goal, survival with dignity. if my acts depart from that. You resist me. The colonel makes a face that would get a private killed by accident. You're writing your own rules of engagement, he says. You're writing our rules of engagement with you. I am teaching you to prefer rules to awe, the Emperor says. That's the most comforting, terrifying thing I've heard, Elena says, and underlines the word steward and then writes, resist if he violates our mandate. Let's talk mandates, Agent Sengupta says, opening the gate they were going to reach anyway. Mercy versus survival. We can't hold both at once in a city of 8 million if the pressure stays. We need to articulate what we are willing to sacrifice. Mercy is not softness, Father Marchesi says. Mercy is realism with human faces intact. Survival is not cruelty, the colonel replies. Presence, finding its muscle memory. It's choosing pain that lets the most breathe next hour. The Emperor turns the debate in his hands like a weapon he knows too well. Steel man both, he says, and obliges himself. Mercy, he says, and his voice brings the room to an exact temperature. Mercy says we do not weaponize panic. We do not empty neighborhoods with orders we cannot enforce. We do not turn screens into commands that erase the will that makes a species worth saving. We forgive mistakes that harm only pride. We hide children from the sight of monsters by changing what the monsters can see. Survival, he says. Same stillness, same mercy buried within. Survival says we black out entire boroughs rather than let a memetic contagion ride your light. We bind men who cannot stop themselves from staring and hold them in rooms with no screens. And we accept their anger. We tell the truth about the cost while we count numbers like surgeons, not poets. We bar the doors of bridges when crowds would trample each other, and we live with being called tyrants for a week so that they can live to call us tyrants. Elena hears her own job handed back to her without a shield. She breathes once and decides to be equal to the moment. Write both, she says to the paper, as if writing tames them. Mercy posture by default, survival posture by exception. Exceptions require 2 signatures, one civil, one sacred, one secret, any 2 of the 3. Steward can call either posture without signatures only in the instant of tactical necessity. Post-event review by all 3. That's a gnarled knot, the colonel says, admiring without warmth. It will hold. Agent Sengupta nods once and then more. And it puts a leash on all of us, she says. Hated equally. Good. A librarian sets down a tray of water in paper cups because hospitality is a tactic. Her hands tremble only on the last cup. The Emperor thanks her with his eyes. She will tell her grandchildren that, and they will pretend not to believe her while believing her. The first hour of peace holds. It is a new kind of fragile. It feels like silence after a shelling you barely read about in history because the writer had no words. In that silence, phones reacquire their carriers. Screens avoid attention. The city learns to count heartbeats instead of likes. Then the quiet dies in a clean way that no one associates with chaos. Lights do not flicker. They cease, not everywhere. The dark draws a circle you could trace with a compass if you had one big enough. It takes in Central Park and stops at the museum like a mouth at a tooth. The American Museum of Natural History becomes the center of the quiet. People inside stop mid-sentence because the sentence loses weight. A docent's tour guide patter forgets verbs. Children point at a meteorite and cannot find the word rock. A guard reaches for his radio and remembers neither channel nor the idea of asking for help. Agent Sengupta feels it on her skin before the radio tells her. Her scalp recognizes the kind of wrong that eats at the edges of thoughts. We have a new event, she says, voice flatter with effort. Origin AMNH, not blue, not Tzeentch. This is a null. Define null, Lena says, already moving. Not the opposite of power, Agent Sengupta says, and swallows once to lubricate words. The opposite of meaning, anti-psi. A dead zone where the light bends inward. The Emperor stops in the act of tracing fiber on a map and stares uptown through floors. His face changes. It changes the way mountains change when weather comes, subtly at the edges, and anyone fool enough to ignore it will be punished. Necron, he says, and the word is a verdict. Sartek signatures, Noctilith resonance. English, Elena says without apology. An old tyranny built from the refusal of souls, he says. Machines that remember being kings. They hate what I am on a level that does not tire. Blackstone that drinks the warp. If a shard awoke in your museum, it is because my path rattled it like bones in a drawer. Power scaling interlude. Noctilith, Blackstone, eats the pattern that lets minds touch without skin. The Emperor's presence here is a pattern anchored by choir lives and symbols. A null dome carves at those anchors like acid under fingernails. If he steps into a strong null, he becomes less real to the eyes that need to see him. If the null sings the right antiphon, his body remembers it is a proxy and tears. Is it them? Agent Sengupta asks, and means, are there robots in the halls? Or is it just a rock? If the stone sings by itself, a mind taught it, the Emperor says. A Cryptek or a drone set to wake at interference, or your own people touched it and made it useful to the wrong memory. The Colonel looks like old guilt has woken up in his spine. The museum has meteorites the size of trucks, he says. Iron nickel. We tested some during the Cold War for properties. Before my time, there are rumors that we kept a shard off-site. Rumors, Agent Sengupta says softly, and hates every bureaucracy she has ever served. Elena flips her notebook to a fresh page, as if whiteness will keep fear from printing through. All right, she says. We're going to the museum. Not because we think we can fix a rock with talk, because if this field grows, it will cut the city in half. Steward, Father Marchesi asks, tasting the word quickly and owning it. Can you function in that? I can function, he says. I will pay for each step with lives I'm already paying. Do not let me spend them like a drunk. They move. SUVs they did not requisition appear because authority is assent. Sirens test their throats and then decide not to be loud. The city watches without the urge to film. It has learned a day's worth of new etiquette. The museum lawns hold people in a quiet that is not stunned. It is carefully arranged denial. Police keep them off the steps with lines of tape and soft hands. A mounted officer's horse lowers its head and breathes heavy and refuses to enter the shade that falls wrong. Inside, the air is a thick that hands can feel. The T-Rex stands reduced, not in size, but in the confidence with which it occupies its own idea. Its skull is a diagram instead of a truth. A security guard tries to meet the Emperor's eyes and finds his own shoes interesting instead. The meteorite room is the throat of the quiet. The iron sits in its cradle as it has for a lifetime of field trips. It drinks light. Around it, hidden in the walls, something new hums. The hum contradicts prayer. Agent Sengupta points without looking up. New fixtures, she says. Fiber patchwork in an old building. Someone sent contractors with the wrong badge. Wrong badge, Elena says, reading the stamps on conduit brackets. The stamps say a vendor name that is a shell with no payroll. We missed the whole op because it looked like work. They look like work because they are, the Colonel says, sick and calm. A null field is a blunt instrument unless you teach it. The smartest way to teach it is to couple it to the city's own rhythms. You make it pulse with the grid, so no one hears it as foreign until it's too late. The Emperor steps closer. The field fingers his armor and finds nothing to grab. It doesn't know armor. It knows songs. It claws for the threads that tie him to choir throats and fails at first because he tied them well. Then it finds a fray that was not there an hour ago and pulls, and the pull hurts. A small boy pressed against the glass watches him. The boy cannot remember the word golden. He can remember that he is less frightened when he looks at the man. That is enough. Do not worship, the emperor says to the field, as if it is a jealous god in a provincial temple. Do not erase. You will teach me nothing by trying to make me mute. The field does not care what he says. It is a machine that loves absence. It has no personality and still carries malice because malice is what absence feels like if you're a mind. Options? Elena asks, voice at half volume, because the room is a church by accident. Remove the stone, the colonel says. Shut the fixtures. Kill power to the block. Breaking a showcase won't break a god. Agent Sengupta says. We need to disrupt the coupling. Father Marchesi steps close to the glass and puts his palm against it the way a child does an aquarium. This is older than our prayers, he says, but it is not older than our names. The emperor reaches as if he will lift the meteorite by thinking. He does not touch it. The glass fogs where his will moves. If I take it by force, he says not to them, I will teach your enemies how I am anchored. They will sing this exact song louder later. If I leave it, your city will forget itself from the middle out. Then we unteach the song, Helena says. We jam it with ours. The colonel laughs once without humor. We're going to run a hearts and bells operation against a black hole. We're going to run a hearts and bells operation against an installation built by someone who believes in control more than we do. Agent Sengupta says. That someone either wore a badge or wants us to think they did. Either way, we beat them at our strength. Consent. Elena lowers her radio until the antenna touches her shoulder. Do it, she says to it. It will obey because it wants to. Every church bell, every school intercom, every car alarm system we can trip without theft, every firehouse roll a slow siren, every clock tower toll on the minute. And you, she points at a TV producer with a press badge who should not be inside, cut live. No graphics packages. Put a camera on a grandmother telling people to look at their neighbor and say their name. The producer blinks because no one has ever told him to do anything as simple and as against his training. He does it because he is tired of being clever. The first bells hit like rainfall on sheet metal. The second wave is voices over intercoms in schools that should be closed at this hour. A teacher who lives across the street runs in with sweatpants and breath and makes the PA work. Her voice tells 10 classrooms of empty desks to be brave and the city to listen. The null field shivers. It does not understand sound. It understands intention. Intention concentrates. The stone does not move. The hum in the walls argues with human throat and finds no purchase because humans did not design it to hear that note. The emperor steps closer. The field takes a bite. It eats a sliver of his presence, and for a second, he becomes less vivid. A man at the back of the room blinks and cannot remember whether the golden figure is in front of him or in a video he is watching later. The emperor holds. He does not regain what the field took. He refuses to give it more. Power to these fixtures, Agent Sengupta says into a channel that knows where its wires run. Find the feed. Cut at the basement. If you can't find it, cut everything that smells like new conduit. A Con-Ed team in a room that knows more about boilers than war flips a knife switch older than their grandparents. The lights do not change. The hum does. It drops a note. In dropping, it reveals a resonance where the stone meets its cradle. There, the colonel says, pointing at 3 bolts that are not museum bolts. Those are not for weight. Those are for phase. Phase, Elena repeats, writing it down because names tame fear. We dephase it. How? With a wrench, the colonel says, because sometimes the old answers still work. A security guard who should not be brave today is brave. He steps over the rope he has yelled at children about for 20 years. He puts his hands on a bolt that does not want to be touched and finds it warm with the wrong heat. He wrenches. It gives the way a tooth gives. The hum skips. The null field hiccups. The Emperor takes a breath and does not wince because he will not teach the room pain as a currency. Again, Agent Sengupta says, and the guard is grateful to be told so. He does not have to decide to be brave twice. He turns the second bolt. The wrong heat fights him. He swears very softly and continues. The third bolt will not cooperate. It is welded to an idea, not to metal. The Emperor lays his hand against the glass near it. The glass wants to shatter to please him. He persuades it to want to hold. You are doing well, he tells the guard without moving his mouth. The guard hears him and laughs because he needed permission to not be a hero and still act. The bolt turns. The hum drops to a growl and then to nothing you can hear. The quiet remains. It is a different species of quiet. It is now simply the absence of electrics, not the absence of meaning. Field degraded, Agent Sengupta says, breathing for the first time in minutes. Not dead. Whoever tuned it will notice we cut a string. They will either come finish the song or they will run. They will come, the Emperor says. Cowards run. The Tzeentch are not cowards. They are insults. Elena looks at him and sees calculation behind contempt. Then we set, she says. Perimeter soft, cameras off, people out. Keep the guard. He's now our technical lead. The guard looks horrified and proud and says his name out loud. It ties him to the city again. He will hold that word in his mouth for weeks, like a lozenge, and it will stop a panic attack in a grocery line. As they file out, a woman in a museum polo grips Elena's arm. I don't know if you're the mayor, she says, because titles blur under stress. But you can tell people we did not do this. We are a building of fossils. We tell stories. We did not want this. You told the right story today, Elena says. You told it with a wrench. That's my favorite kind. On the steps, the air feels thinner. The Emperor's glow is muted by an amount that would matter only to gods and to those who feel scales under their fingertips when they weigh fate. He rolls his shoulders like a man who has been hit in a place armor does not protect. He is not diminished. He is less comfortable. Cost, Father Marchesi says. Yes, the Emperor says. Agent Sengupta's phone vibrates with a call that should not be able to reach her. She answers because the day rewards boldness. A voice she has not heard in years says, "You're playing with rock you do not understand." "We just untuned your toy," she says. "I'm guessing I now understand enough to put you in cuffs." "You can try," the voice says, calm with the kind of calm that comes from knowing where everyone sleeps. The field protects you from the pretty god. It protects you from everything like him. That is not a threat. It is a gift. She does not look at the Emperor when she says, "We don't need protection from those who show up and hold the sky steady." "You will," the voice says, and hangs up. She logs the number and knows the log will erase itself if she tries to pull it later. She tells no one the content for now, not because she is disloyal, because she must choose the order of alarms. They return to the library because maps are a fetish they can afford. The table collects new notes pinned on with gum and coffee. A runner drops a printed stack of names. Hospitals with generators. A priest adds a list of churches willing to open overnight beds. A rabbi adds a list of volunteers who speak enough languages for a city that refuses to be monolingual. The first ideology clash finds its second wind. The argument does not sound like anger. It sounds like engineering. We need curfew, the colonel says. Voluntary first. Mandatory if the blue comes back or the black grows. The fewer moving pieces, the fewer cuts in the wrong places. Curfews make poor neighborhoods into crime scenes, Elena says. They make everyone with a delivery job into a suspect. We are not writing a policy that will get remembered as a rehearsal for something worse. We are not writing a policy to be remembered at all, he replies. We are writing something to be survived. Then we cut narrow, Agent Sengupta says. Nighttime quiet zones in radii around null points. We name them explicitly temporary. We publish the criteria for lifting them. We set a short sunset clause and force ourselves to renew in public if we must. Father Marchesi's voice drops into the cracks between their hard words. There is also the question of who bows, he says. He told people not to worship. People will. You need language for that too. Elena rubs her temple with the side of her pencil, not enough to smudge the page. We don't police hearts, she says. We police behavior. No kneeling in the way of ambulances. No fainting in front of elevators. No new churches built around a man who hasn't asked for one. Agent Sengupta bites down on something and keeps it bitten. We also have to plan for if he falls, she says, and the room does not like that sentence. I am not building a cult. I am building a city that can absorb an event and continue. I applaud you, the Emperor says. You will be tempted to make me your excuse for all your failures and all your tyrannies. Do not. I will not be here forever. I refuse to be your scapegoat when you discover you always had to be brave. The colonel nods to that because he has run out of disdain for competence. Then let's write your leash tighter, he says, and draws a box labeled Steward Powers. Under it he writes, no lethal force unless lethal force is already in play. No orders to religious bodies. No control of media beyond counter-memetic operations agreed. No permanent institutions founded in his name. The Emperor watches the list accrue and feels a pressure in his chest that is not physical. It feels like the moment he ordered the destruction of a library on a world that would not live if it kept the ideas it loved. He blesses this city for choosing rules he does not write. Alarm, new alarm, a runner says from the door, breath hitching. Feedy screens, stay down, but we're seeing a pattern near Grand Central, not blue, not black, something that looks like someone trying to sell us insurance. The room looks at him like he is joking. He is not. Show me, Agent Sengupta says, and he thrusts a printed frame at her because printing saves sanity right now. It is an ad. It is a smiling family. Their teeth are wrong by a fraction visible only if you are inhuman. Tzeentch learned from our counter, the colonel says. They're riding the idea of trust. They're iterating. And the null taught them where we are thin, the Emperor says. They are not allied. They are opportunists. But they have learned the timing of our hearts. He looks toward Midtown and sees a lattice of concepts whose edges have been sanded. To not catch your eye. It will not flood. It will seep. People will sign. They will sign with attention. Contracts will write themselves in their retinas. What counters a contract? Father Marchesi asks, aghast that the question makes sense. Covenant, the Emperor says. Older, messier. Not a signature. A vow. No paper. Just shame if you break it. Elena snaps her notebook closed. Then we draft vows, she says. Simple, spoken, broadcast from 1,000 mouths. I will not sign what I do not understand. I will not look at what makes me less real. I will hold my neighbor's name if mine gets thin. It will sound hokey, the colonel says. It will work, she says, because hokey is what you call a thing that binds when you have no vocabulary for binding. They set the second wave of countermeasures in motion. Schools that are open practice the vow with children who will remember it at bedtime. Bars write it on chalkboards, and the chalk dust gets into people's hair. Subway conductors read it between stops and commit it to the cadence that makes doors close without pinching fingers. The smarter foe enters at the edges and is met by a city that has decided that attention is a discipline. It does not know what to do with discipline. It sulks, and sulking is expensive for a god that thrives on surprise. At dusk, the museum yawns and relaxes by too little. The quiet remains. The emperor knows it is a promise, not a threat. Somewhere beneath the museum, beneath stone that remembers oceans, a shape that was not a room yesterday is a room today. It is waiting for a mind with metal bones to arrive. It might walk like a man. It will not be one. He stands on the library steps and watches the light go gold. He feels the choir's load and divides it along axes that preserve more than they burn. He learns the names of the people who will be able to hold small knots of reality when he is not there. Not saints, only reliable. Steward, Eleanor says. Not as a title, but as a dress. We're going to start handing you less. Not because we want less of you, because we need more of us. Good, he says. If I do this well, you will tire of me by necessity. Agent Sengupta stands beside him and looks up 6th Avenue at the flat dark where the museum quiet sits like a bruise. You said Salte, she says. You said Noctilith. You're naming our next fight. I am naming old enemies who wear their vanity like armor, he says. They will not send legions into your streets. Not yet. They will send a scholar with a scalpel. That is always how they begin. Scholar, she says, and taste the image of a man who calls himself a doctor as he unthreads souls. Father Marchesi watches the crowd and the lack of kneeling with private relief. He expects to be jealous and is not. He is too tired and too full of gratitude that someone stands where he cannot. He finds a bench and writes a homily on a napkin and then tears it up because homilies are not what people need tonight. They need tea and someone to hold their vow with them. Night falls like a reasonable decision. Streetlights raise their crowns. Windows glow with television that is gentler than usual. Men who sell things with fear decide to sell soap. The museum's quiet changes key. No one hears it except those tuned to listen. The emperor hears. Agent Sengupta's filling aches. Elena's pencil breaks. Father Marchesi's napkin tears even though he has stopped tearing. In the meteorite room, a figure wakes in a place where humans think they shut the machine. It does not stand from a bed. It stands from a memory of standing and occupies a body that fits a proportion humans call statuesque. Emerald lights move under a face that is not a face, but a mask wiped clean of all indulgence. A staff that is a cruelty disguised as a tool hums in its hand. It takes one step and makes the floor. Remember that it will break one day. It takes another and meets the guard who thought he had gone home. The guard recognizes a doctoral robe in metal and the posture of a lecturer who never learned mercy. He lifts his flashlight and says, "Sir," because the species insists on politeness in the face of death. The Cryptek of the Tzeentch dynasty does not answer. It examines the hole where the field it tuned failed by 3 bolts. It adjusts its plan. It sends a pulse that rethreads the resonance through a root. The humans will not find without tearing the walls apart. It begins to hum a counter-vow that says, "Do not need." The emperor straightens on the library steps, the way a dog turns its head at ultrasound. "He is here," he says. "Name," Agent Sengupta says, already walking. "Cryptek," he says. "A scientist priest. He will claim to have no prayers. He will be lying." Elena gestures for the city to save its breath. "We don't have assets on site," she says into the net. "Do not rush. We meet him with a plan or we do not meet him. What hurts you about him?" Agent Sengupta asked, a scientist even in fear. His field makes me a rumor, the Emperor says. I am endurance expressed as will. Will needs recognition to anchor in flesh. If he brings a true pariah with him, he will bruise me in ways you cannot bandage. What helps? She asks. Noise, he says. Not volume, multiplicity, choice. You are strong in your habits of talk. Bring them with you. They build a movement under the movement, not a march, a drift with purpose. Volunteers who look like everyone move toward the museum in pairs, each carrying a card with words to say out loud. The words are small. They are, my name is, I am here, I choose to stand, I will leave when told. They are not poetry, they are scaffolding. ESU positions in alleys and hallways with nothing metallic on their persons that a null field can erase into dust. The colonel arranges stairwells like chess when he gets to use bishops. Father Marchesi chooses the prayer he will not speak unless it is needed. A prayer for dignity in humiliation. They move into the quiet, and the quiet eats at the edges, and they continue. The Cryptek watches from the top of a stair and adjusts his staff's grip as you adjust a scalpel before a cut you have rehearsed. His calculations include the gold figure and the choir he smells. His disdain for them is a philosophy, not a mood. In the hall of African mammals, under impala that look mid-flee, the emperor meets the quiet like water. It presses. He does not press back with more. He allows its shape and subtracts what it takes from him from his own account. Before it can taste the choir across the stars, it tastes a different thing than it wanted, and is confused. Come out, he says, not loud. Show your citation. The Cryptek steps into view as if obeying form. You are an error, it says in a voice that is not a voice but a broadcast of contempt. Language is a courtesy. It extends none. The contempt translates anyway. You persist out of your pitiless apparatus. I will resolve you. The Emperor does not unsheathe a weapon, because he did not bring one he trusts in this room. You tidy a world into obedience, he says. You call that salvation. You are wrong for this species. Your species will be collected or culled, the Cryptek says, and gestures with the staff. The gesture is not dramatic. It is the flick a surgeon makes to indicate a nurse should hand over a tool. Space between two moments becomes thinner. The Emperor's hand flickers. For a breath, it is less a hand and more the idea of a hand recalled by a poor witness. He holds the self with effort that would lift a planet if applied to rock. The null field is a clever one. It does not batter. It erases nouns. He speaks his own name inside his skull and burns a thread of choir to make the syllables stick. Agent Sengupta watches his outline smear and decides on speed. Talk, she says to the volunteers in the hallways, voice low, loving. Say your names. Say them over each other. Say them in your languages. Make a mess he can't clean. Names fill the museum. They bounce off dioramas and into plaster ceilings. They are full of food and weather and grandmothers and subway lines. They are a riot with no looting. They are a gallery of human audacity. To exist, to persist, to be proud of the methods of making tea. The Cryptek's field notes flicker. The tuning it did against a city's power grid wobbles against a city's mouths. It recovers. It is good at recovering. It steps down another stair like a professor descending to show on your paper where you mispunctuated. You do not want to see my mercy, the Emperor says. Mercy in my hands is surgical. You will not like how clean the wound is. The Cryptek raises the staff and points it not at the Emperor, but at the volunteers. It has learned that hurting him directly is expensive. It will erase his witnesses and thus his anchor. It draws a line of absence across air. The line hits a woman from Jackson Heights who says her name like a tango. She staggers. Her partner catches her elbow. "Say it again," he whispers, and she does, and the line passes through a mental scaffolding that does not fit the Cryptek's table of allowed values. It snarls. It cuts her scarf instead of her mind. She laughs because fear comes out sideways. The Emperor moves as if the museum's floor carries him like a conveyor. He is closer now. The null eats at him. He has no time to be particular. He closes with the Cryptek with an economy that would shame dancers. The staff swings. He lets it strike his chest plate not as metal, but as symbol. It draws a mark not seen by eyes. It marks him in the ledger of ideas as moored to attention. It will matter later. He knows it. He accepts it and converts the force of the blow into angle. He turns the Cryptek by its staff, as if it is a partner engaged by consent. It is not consent. It is leverage. The Cryptek recalls a millennia-old duel with a saint who carried a banner into a phase field and died smiling because dying had a meaning. It hates memory. It flickers. The Emperor uses the flicker to place one palm on the staff. His hand burns where it meets anti-meaning. He does not scream. Screaming would help the field do its job. "Now," Agent Sengupta says into a throat mic at less volume than a whisper, "ESU moves not like stormtroopers, but like custodians who know which doors stick. They do not fire. They have nothing to fire that will not make a better hole." The colonel directs men to pull duffels into walls. Not explosives, not guns. Heavy blankets. They throw them over glass cases and over the iron meteorite and over each other. They make insulation out of museum conservation protocol. "Explain," Eleanor says, already loving the tactic for its lack of glamour. "Null feels like clean edges," he says. "We're making edges dirty. We're adding softness where the song wants hard. We're wasting its math." The field hiccups under cloth. The Cryptek tries to retune and the Emperor denies it with a twist of wrist that would pop a shoulder if joints meant anything to these bones. He feels a snap, not in his body, in the thread between him and one quiet death. He has spent that life like a coin to shift a debt. He leans his mask near the Cryptek's blank faceplate. "Leave," he says. "You do not understand cities. You think in monuments. We think in crowds." The Cryptek pulses contempt again. It is an old song. It calls down a tighter null around its feet. The Emperor's outline sags as if heat has smoothed it. For 3 heartbeats, those watching cannot describe what color his eyes are. Then the names come louder. Then a bell in a parish that thought it was too far to matter rings hard enough to crack a bracket. The choir stumbles. It does not fall. It loses grace. That is the opening. The Emperor releases the staff and instead grips the space around it with will. Space is tired. It listens to the first mind that speaks to it clearly. He firms it like muddy ground under a boot. The Cryptek's foot finds traction where it expected glide. It miscalculates by 1/10 of a second. That is enough for humans who do not sleep through fights. Agent Sengupta is not a fighter in the sense the museum displays. She is a fighter in the sense of run sheets and interlocks and redundancies. She cues a recording she told no one she was making. The vow, in 50 voices layered. It pours from fire alarm speakers because those have power independent of building choices. The field eats some of it, not enough. The Cryptek decides the calculation is no longer elegant and steps backward into a node it laid into a wall. Its body phases a degree. It will exit sideways and return later with a better map. The Emperor recognizes the math because he has stolen it from other enemies and politely never returned it. He grabs the node with human fingers and pins it the way you pin a hymn to a bulletin board with a thumbtack. The face stutters. The Cryptek is too precise to panic. It despises panic because panic is messy. It makes a new plan to kill everyone here in a way that cleans the floor after. Not today, the Emperor says, and drives his forehead into the Cryptek's mask without grandeur. The mask cracks. The crack is not simply physical. It is an insult on a level the Tzeentch remember. It will become a small myth that bothers them later. The Cryptek leaves anyway, because sometimes leaving is the correct next line in your theorem. It does not run. It rewrites where it is and is not. The Emperor can hold a human city together with threads of consent. He cannot hold a Necron in a room without tools he refuses to cool down, because doing so would break the building that has hosted field trips for a century. The null remains, weaker, receding. It is now a bruise that will take a day to yellow. The volunteers lower their cards and blink at each other, like people who have just remembered their names after a fever. The guard with the wrench sits down on a bench and cries into his hands for exactly 10 seconds, and then composes himself because he has keys. Outside, the city feels the tug and relaxes a notch. The screen near Grand Central shows an ad for insurance that is only an ad. People walk past. One of them reads the vow under his breath without noticing and smiles because he has named himself and is still took. Back at the library, Elena circles the museum on the map with a pencil that has been sharpened to a weapon. "We have a null signature," she says. "We have a new player. We have to classify them for the public. You will be tempted to call them machines," the Emperor says. "Do not. They are worse. Machines can be friends. These are ambitions in metal. Call them what they are. A dead empire that wants company." "Dead empire," Agent Sengupta repeats, because she knows how to write a press release that avoids mysticism without lying. "We say, an alien mechanism has been activated. It produces a local effect that interferes with thought. We counter with human voices and civic vows. Some will laugh," the Colonel says. "Laughter is not an argument," Elena says. "We have to bet on the people who will choose to be citizens instead of audience." Father Marchesi lowers himself into a chair as if permission has been granted. "You kept the sermon short," he tells the Emperor. Half compliment, half plea to continue. "You will be asked to speak again. I will not give you doctrine," he says. "I will give you orders when necessary. If I give you doctrine, you will burn books for me without asking." "Noted," Elena says, and underlines something twice that is not a law, but will behave like one. The joint cell grows in competence, not because it becomes more militarized, but because it becomes better at boredom. Someone's job becomes to call every bell tower on the hour. Someone else's job becomes to sit in a van outside the museum and eat sandwiches and count the rate at which the null bruise fades. Someone's job becomes to sit with a family whose father signed a contract with an ad and talk him out of thinking he must obey a lie. The smarter foe's entrance triggers bureaucracy, which turns out astonishingly to be good. Forms appear that teach their own ethics. Checklists propagate, not because someone yells, but because lives were saved by a checklist. As midnight approaches, the Emperor stands at a window and watches his reflection choose to be clear or not. It chooses. He accepts that tonight he is less himself to some eyes. He will pay that back tomorrow. He will take it from enemies who deserve it. Agent Sengupta leans on the sill beside him, a posture too casual for the burden it carries. "You knew they'd come," she says. "I hoped they would not notice a path that is not for them," he says. "Hope is a drug. It is not the worst one. We're writing rules," she says, "for you and for everything like you. We can't finish them today, but we have to start with the most dangerous sentence." "Which is?" he asks. "Who is allowed to decide?" she says, and laughs once without mirth. The answer can't be the brightest object in the room. "It can be the room," he says. "If the room decides it wants to live." She nods. "Then that's the doctrine we deny we're writing," Father Marchese passes them with a stainless kettle and mismatched mugs. He pours tea that tastes like kindness. "We should sleep in shifts," he says, as if he has ever been obeyed at midnight. Elena is still writing when the first message comes in from a precinct in the Bronx. A man on a corner is telling people he can lock their names in a safe that the blue and the black cannot touch. He is charging $10. He is getting rich. "We have to accept parasites," the colonel says. "Cities have them. We swat some. We ignore most. If we try to purge all, we will do more harm than any god could." "Welcome to government," Eleanor says dryly, and pencils in a line item. "Parasites tolerated by design." The Emperor closes his eyes and listens to the choir bleed across time and space. He chooses where to lay weight so fewer throats end in static. He cannot save them all. He will not pretend he can. He sends a thought across the abyss. "Hold for one more dawn. I will not waste you." In the meteorite room, the Cryptek studies the crack in his mask in a reflection and knows he has been disrespected in the language of empires. He composes a reply that will hurt the concept of steward in a way the humans have not defended. He builds a weapon that is not a weapon, a rumor that the golden man cannot cross water if no one looks at him. He will test it at dawn. On the library steps, a woman from Queens teaches her granddaughter the vow as if it is bedtime prayer. The girl asks if she can sing it. The woman says yes. The girl sings off-key and does not summon anything terrible. Two strangers listen and smile, and a small flock of pigeons tilts their heads like critics. The first victory holds. The war council breathes. The debate sharpens into policy. The smarter foe writes lines into the dark that will cut in the morning. The city sleeps with one eye open and for once uses that eye to watch the person next to it, not the screen. Night takes its seat on the city and does not blink. The bruise at the museum holds its color. The vow has become a habit, not a novelty. The Emperor stands in a half-lit map room and taps his finger once on the island's spine. "Their goal is not harvest," he says. "It is test. The Tzeentch probe the edges of your meaning to see where a lattice might fit. If they can drop pylons and stitch them through your grid, they will make a cage in which souls cannot sing. The changer rides whatever attention we fail to train. These two despise each other, but they will nest inside the same hour and call that strategy. They don't need to win," Agent Sengupta says. "They need a foothold in a story that makes us fight ourselves. Standard counters fail because we keep telling them what we value," the colonel says, pointing at the fiber overlay. "Every time we black out, they learn which hospitals cost us more noise. Every time we ring a bell, they triangulate which bells we kept. We are an honest organism. They like that." "What do we do?" Elena asks, pen ready to write something that isn't a slogan. "We cut and we sing," the Emperor says, "but we stop being predictable in our places. We make decoys in concrete. We move sanctuaries night to night, and we do not let me become the spine of your resilience. I'm a brace, not a column." He turns the paper with 2 fingers. There is a new stamp over the East River, a circle drawn at Roosevelt Island. The colonel frowns. "That's a Conhead relay," he says. "Switching yard buried on an island we treat like scenery. They will treat it like an altar," the Emperor says. "If they tune that, the museum stops being a bruise and becomes a numbness you mistake for calm." "Access by bridge or tram," Elena says. "Water on both sides. We can't shut it without killing Midtown for the night. Then we hold it," Agent Sengupta says. The words come out as if she planned them yesterday. He nods once. "We move now. I will step where the rumor says I cannot." They look at him. "What rumor?" Elena asks. "It was seeded while we fought," he says. "The Cryptek will test a thought, that I cannot cross water unless watched. Words have weight. If enough mouths say it, it becomes a thread that clever hands can pull. That's ridiculous, the colonel starts, and stops because he's learned to distrust his reflex. Facts that depend on minds are the only ones that matter to gods, the emperor says. They step into the night with a city that has made peace with sirens as a kind of song. Volunteers assemble along the avenues with cards and headlamps. ESU rolls out quiet. A line forms on the Brooklyn Bridge, not of cars, but of people who hold their eyes open as an act of civic duty. He steps onto the pedestrian span. The river's skin accepts him and then thinks about refusing on principle. The rumour is a taut line across the current, thin as air and strong as steel. He feels it bite at his boot like wire. Eyes on him, Elena says into 20 borrowed channels. No filming. Witness. Name your names while you look. People do not want to look at him because looking at bright things creates hunger. They do it anyway. They whisper their names on a beat that is not quite a march cadence. He lifts his foot and sets it down. The rumour tightens. It wants to be true. The Cryptek rides the rumour from a rooftop on the Manhattan side. It holds a phase key in one hand and an amulet of blackstone in the other, and hums a song that removes verbs. It does not come down to the bridge. It is not a fool. It does not need to be close to cut. Halfway across, the city blinks. It's not power, it's attention. A group of teens near the arch look away in the same heartbeat at a flitting shadow on the skyline. It is nothing. It is enough. His foot meets water that has decided to remember gravity. He sinks 6 inches. The rumour slices a groove along his shin like a loving kiss that wants to be a wound. Across the abyss, 3 choir throats die in one spasm as the anchor jerks. He does not cry out. The pain is precise and informative. It says, you are moored to eyes. It says, if they make you no one's business for a breath, you become a story later. He meets it and assigns it a ledger line. Eyes back, Agent Sengupta says, voice not loud, aimed like a rifle. Now, look at what keeps you alive. Don't stare, don't gawk. Witness. The teens turn back. One whispers his name because someone told him to. The rumour slackens a hair. He lifts his foot, and the river lets him leave as if embarrassed to have doubted. A shape uncoils on a mooring near Dumbo. It is small as a man and wrong as a theorem that solves itself with a 0 on the bottom. A pariah drone, Noctilith, caged in cunning, drifts toward the footpath and sheds heat it stole from meanings. A jogger stumbles as her idea of a head loses colour. Left, the colonel says into a net mapped to footfalls. Block, no metal contacts, use cloth. ESU moves like a stagehand crew changing scenes in a rehearsal they own. A tarp drops over the drone. It hums an ugly key. The hum eats stitches. A volunteer who is poor at fear throws his thick winter coat over the tarp because he has nothing else. The hum finds that coat heavy with a mother's mended places and chokes on it. The Emperor reaches the Manhattan side. His right shin leaks light where the rumour licked him. The light is not blood. It is a concept that exhausted itself to block a concept. He refuses to let anyone see him falter. He does not mind if they see him pause. Status? Eleanor asks. Rumour wound. Shallow but real, Agent Sengupta says, eyes on his gate. Witness line stays up until he's off the river for the return. Roosevelt Island. We move. They go down into the belly of a city that remembers being swamp and becomes steel out of pride. The tram hangs black in the air. The bridge spans like a string over teeth. The switching yard on the island is a field of quiet boxes with labels that mean do not touch to everyone, but gods and engineers. The Cryptek is already inside the fence. It leaves no footprints. It leaves a feeling like your name written wrong in a ledger you'll never see. It routes the field from the museum into the relay and back out again, like threading a needle and using the river as a loop. Its staff sings a note that kills typists. He steps onto the island's grass, and the grass withdraws loyalty, and then returns it because it remembers simply liking being alive. He feels the null bite at his edges. He does not push back with volume. He braces with choices. Perimeter soft, Agent Sengupta says. No drones, no loud. Witness line around the relay. Names on the minute. You, she points to a volunteer in a delivery jacket. Keep your eyes on him even if something explodes. That is your entire job. The delivery man nods. His entire job has been to see addresses no one bothers to notice. He is good at it. The Cryptek steps from behind a transformer like a judgment. Its mask is spidered. It has repaired the crack's function, not its face. Pride later. Now, work. It raises the staff in greeting as if this is a colloquium. This world will be grateful, it broadcasts, contempt draped like velvet. When the warp screaming ends, when no voices reach across fire to chain gods to thrones, when silence heals, the Emperor advances without theorem. Silence is not health, he says. It is simply quiet. Quiet at the wrong time is a kind of murder. It draws the staff through air in a slow parabola. On the third of the arc, he moves. He has no sword here he trusts. He has his hands. He cuts angle like a cadet and like a king. The staff skims his forearm and doesn't hit flesh. Hits the idea of his arm. The anchor that makes it present in minds. The idea phrase. His hand flickers. The volunteers gasp and keep looking because fear obeys orders if you give it a shape to follow. He catches the staff low and pulls. The Cryptek does not resist with strength. It resists with subtraction. It erases his leverage and gives him back the sensation of having moved nothing. He reads that and changes tempo. He feints a thought, then places one boot on the base of the staff and pivots. A transformer behind him hums a warning. He uses the hum the way a sailor uses wind. It stabs with an absence blade that is not metal. He doesn't parry. He lets it mark his chest because he needs to know how far the scar will travel. The wound enters through a place the staff previously touched. It travels along the rumor furrow on his shin and ties the two like a sentence with a conjunction. He tastes copper he did not manufacture. He watches his own outline dim a shade. Now we learn something, he says aloud, for the benefit of people who need words to hold a thought. The Cryptek adjusts a dial an organist would envy. The null tightens. A volunteer's voice dries mid-name, and he cannot remember the word I. He claps his hands as if to make noise with flesh and remembers himself. He smiles at how foolish and brave that is, and keeps looking. The Emperor reaches not for the staff but for the field around it. He needs it. It resists like cold dough. He warms it with wrath. Wrath is a fuel like any other. He has used better fuels and worse. He pinches an inflection and snaps it like a guitar string. The field stutters. The Cryptek takes half a step. Half a step is a page torn from a plan. He drives his shoulder into the Cryptek's torso. They weigh nothing to each other. They weigh too much. The impact is a translation between languages that hate each other. The staff goes wide. He hooks an elbow into the space the staff must occupy to finish its arc. He occupies that space with meaning. The staff meets meaning and sparks, emerald against gold. The Cryptek pulses a packet of intent at the switching yard. The relay hums in gratitude. Boxes flip themselves. A line to Midtown heats. Street lights 40 blocks north blink without power change because the blinking is a thought trick, not electrons. People feel a calm they did not consent to, and then decide to be suspicious of calm. The vow catches just enough of them to tangle the trick. On the island, the two entities that define eras wrestle with rhetoric like It's a weapon with an edge. The Emperor is older. The Cryptek is colder. Cold resists decay. Age makes a music of it. It drops a second pariah drone into grass that shortens to avoid it. The drone sings a notch lower than the staff. He feels the choir's line to him sag. He compensates by opening a channel he had closed to economize. 4 voices burn where 2 were burning. He hates this. He does it anyway. Price, he says to himself, to keep the accounting honest. The Cryptek senses the increase in choir consumption and files it as a lever for later. It speaks temptation through its contempt, because it understands negotiation as a condescension, not an exchange. You tether yourself to screaming sinners on a rusted throne, it says. Stop. Take our lattice. End your enemy by turning off the current. Be a shepherd of bodies. Leave the souls to history. He could end the warp's access to this city by accepting a net of blackstone that would teach the air to ignore prayer. He could let terror rest. The image arrives with all the seduction of rest earned after a war that has been a species weather. He could choose a quiet he can defend with engineers instead of martyrs. He almost smiles because the offer is not stupid. It is monstrous only because it is so sane. No, he says, I will not amputate the part that makes you worth saving. The Cryptek's contempt becomes sterile. You fear being less than God, it says. I fear becoming you, he says. It slashes. He takes the cut on symbols again because he cannot afford trauma to muscle. The mark links shin to chest. His anchor groans. For one breath, a woman on Lexington sees through him to a bus ad behind him, even though he is not there to her eyes. She startles and reasserts him with her attention. She saves him without knowing she saved anything larger than her own sanity. Agent Sengupta has her back against a transformer, watching with her mouth shut in a way that costs her. She keys a mic with a thumb. Names, she says. Now, louder, in pairs. Pairs fill the air with ugly beauty. They step on each other because they refuse to take turns. They refuse because this is what stubborn victory looks like. Rude, overlapping, impossible to insert a sterilizing wedge between 2 voices. The Cryptek tries to step away. He gives it no ground to translate into. He lifts his hand and places it open against its face. He does not crush. He anoints with will. You do not understand grace, he says softly. And it flinches not because it has faith, but because the word carries faiths with it like thorns. It leaves, not beaten, rerouted. It phases sideways and abandons a drone that immediately becomes a lump of exhausted black rock. The relay's hum drops to human noise. The volunteers blink as if waking. He stands still and takes inventory. The rumor wound pulsing at his shin. The chest mark tying it to his mooring. The choir line hotter by 4. The city held. The enemy educated, not destroyed. Codex note. Wound type. Noctilith memetic ligation. A blackstone-induced negation tied to a seeded belief. Effects. Visibility dependent stability. Increased choir consumption under observation gaps. Mitigation. Continuous witness. Counter-ritual density. Surgical disruption of phase nodes. A volunteer with a delivery jacket and a vow card looks at him without awe, because awe would make him useless. Are you okay? He asks, which is a ridiculous question and thus perfect. No, the Emperor says, but I am sufficient. Sirens throw and then subsume into the steady beat. ESU moves blankets, gathers drones, logs, unromantically. Eleanor arrives at a trot that refuses to become a run. We held, she says, reading the island like a report. At cost. Costs we can afford tonight, Agent Sengupta says. Not forever. A woman steps out from the shadow of a floodlight. They did not turn on. She is thin in a way that speaks to a life made of refusals. Her eyes do not meet his because her entire body flinches from whatever he is. The air around her is frosted glass. Noise goes quiet before it reaches her and then remembers itself after it passes. He knows what she is before she speaks, because the pain he feels near her is a family he knows, a blank, a pariah, a human whose presence is the absence of the warp's itch, a sister, if this world had built a place for such women. It has not. She walks toward him with her jaw clenched as if bracing for a storm. He is that storm. What is your name? Father Marchesi asks gently, stepping half a pace to intercept the pain. The woman scrapes her voice up. Starling, she says. It is a street name. It is better than legal names tonight. I can stand here if it helps. It will hurt you, the Emperor says, and means both proximity and the life that follows someone like her. I have been hurting since I was a kid, she says. At least now, it will have a reason. She steps into the field's footprint. It thins around her, not because she fights, but because she stills it by being a hole it cannot fill. The rumor wound on his shin stings less. The chest mark cools. He breathes once with something like gratitude and hates it because he knows what his empire did with women like this. Drafted them, silenced them, used them as levers, called it necessary. He will not make those choices here without question and without asking their price. Starling sways. He reaches toward her and then checks himself because his touch is pain to her. Chairs, Eleanor says, and people who have nothing to do with war produce chairs like magicians. They set a chair for Starling and one for the Emperor near her, but not too near. The way you seat someone with an allergy next to peanuts, with a respectful distance. What now? Agent Sengupta asks, eyes on Starling with a scientist's look she hates herself for using. He offered you a bargain. You said no. He will sweeten the next one with a knife. He will offer to end your gods by ending your capacity to be prey, the Emperor says. He will call it kindness. He will ask me to help. I will refuse again. Each refusal will cost you some of me. The changer will counter with the only thing it respects, optimization. It will offer me a cleaner city if I install myself at the center of your will. We will not give you that city, Elena says, with relief that surprises her by how much it costs to admit. Good, he says. He stands and takes a step, and the rumor tugs and then does not, because 50 people look at him with names on their tongues, as if attention is a safety line. He feels the shame of needing what he has taught entire legions to transcend. He feels it and makes it a line item. Pride is cheaper than defeat. They walk off the island like penitent kings. The city holds its breath for a beat and then lets it out. The lights remain where they belong. The ads are just lies written by humans, which is endearing compared to what howling things can write. In the library, they lay out a new column on the paper table. Witness core. They do not call it that aloud. They call it watch lines, and that makes it civic instead of cult. Volunteers sign without being told that this is what their eyes were for. They assign Starling to a circle of medics who do not know how to treat what she is, and will learn by watching and by listening when she says stop. Father Marchesi sits beside her and says nothing. He has never felt more like a priest than when he has no words and still needs to be present. The Emperor steps into a stairwell to breathe, because sometimes walls help. He places his palm on cool stone and speaks in no language, a message across an impossible span. The choir answers with a static that is not static. It is the sound of faith when you refuse to call it that. He tastes iron and ash. He allocates 100 lives to mourning. It is a choice. It is a sin if you need it to be. Temptations have footnotes now, Agent Sengupta says when he returns. You heard the end the screaming pitch. The other side's pitch is dressed nicer. I can feel it knocking. A promise to route all ads through a clean channel. A promise to make crowds behave with a whisper. It says, it can do it with no one noticing. It says, you will never have to ask for witness again. He looks at her and sees the scientist within the agent and respects her for pulling the strings of her own mind where she is weakest. It is not lying, he says. It can do that. I can do that with it. In a day, you will have a city of calm, polite corpses who still eat and kiss and never truly decide anything again. Elena will mutiny, the colonel says. Elena will lead the mutiny, Elena says. So will I, Father Marchesi says softly, and smiles because it feels good to admit which side of a righteous fight he wants to stand on. Then we are aligned, the Emperor says. I refuse the lattice. I refuse the optimization. I accept the rumor as a constraint. I accept the blank as a gift that hurts both of us. I accept that to speak to your supreme authority, I must let you build one that can say no. Supreme authority, Elena repeats. You mean the courts, the president, the UN? She says the last with a dare. I mean the consent of your city, dressed in whatever pageantry convinces you to gather without shooting, he says. A hall with banners and a chair you call a throne even if you hate thrones. A place with enough weight that when it says go, I go. And when it says stop, I stop unless stopping kills more than obeying. The General Assembly, Agent Sengupta says, and hates herself for how right it sounds as logistics. We can fill it with witnesses who know what they are doing there. We can ring it with people like Starling if she agrees. We can write a covenant that is not a contract. We can ask him to swear and we will swear back. We can't keep the Saute from intercepting a procession like that, the colonel says. They will send something smarter than a drone, a mirror of you, something that offers your weakness as strength. Let them, the Emperor says. We will be on pilgrimage in a city that knows how to walk. Interceptions are invitations. A side door creaks, and a boy who should be asleep but isn't leans in. His mother pulls him back, apologizing in a language no one in the room speaks, and that needs no translation. The boy looks at the golden man, and then at Starling, and then at Elena with her cheap notebook, and then at Father Marchesi with his kettle, and decides that adults are sometimes enough. He leaves. The creak sounds again like a bell. They draft the route with a ruler, and then toss the ruler and pick the route with a finger. They choose streets that understand crowds. They choose rooftops that like snipers and decide not to give them snipers tonight. They choose churches and synagogues and mosques and gurdwaras and libraries along the way, not for protection, but because the city needs to be itself loudly to make meaning hard to steal. At the museum, the Cryptek collects its drones and remembers the crack in its mask like an itch it cannot scratch, without admitting humiliation. It considers calling in a Triarch stalker to stride along Park Avenue and make a lesson of mercy. It decides against it. It has found a better lever. Rumor. It will place 4 lies in the next hour. One will be that the golden man cannot bear the sound of laughter. One will be that he drinks attention and will starve if you ignore him. One will be that he will leave if you all kneel. One will be that he fears bridges if no one names the river. It will watch which one the city chooses and tune the feel to it. On a bench, Starling sleeps with her shoulders around herself. A medic counts her pulse with 2 fingers, and the blank between their palms hurts like a burn and feels like a relief, and both of them do not pull away. Father Marchesi watches and does not bless her. He simply stays. The Emperor sits alone for the length of 3 breaths in a room full of maps and cups. He thinks of terror, not the symbol, the place, the smell of oil and spit and paper and stone, the sound of a hand on the arm of a chair, the taste of regret kept warm. He thinks of a throne that is a machine that remembers being a chair. He thinks of his own will, wearing a body that is starting to learn suspicion of water. He laughs once at the absurdity and does not enjoy it. He rises. He walks the floor, and each step keeps a promise he made this morning. To be precise, to be gentle, to ask first, to cut only when he must. Dawn slides along rooftops with the tired grace of a dancer after the first show. The vow threads through coffee lines and bus stops. The rumor hisses like steam from a vent. It will be a day of tests. He welcomes it. He also dreads it. Welcome and dread are not enemies. They are colleagues who take turns. A bell rings somewhere too early and too hard. It is not a sign. It is a man with heavy hands on a rope. It sounds like a sign, and that is enough to make a city turn its head and then choose to keep walking toward a hall where the flags of enemies sit politely together. He feels the wound on his shin tick with the crowd's attention, like a dog's ear twitching at a whisper. He adjusts nothing to hide it. He lets it be seen when it will teach. Pilgrimage, Elena says to the radio, borrowing a word she would not have used yesterday. Step off in 20. No banners, no chants. Vow only. General assembly at end. If anyone tells you to kneel, you remember who taught you to stand. Agent Sengupta checks the nets, the lines, the favors she cashed, and the ones she will owe. She assigns watchers who do not have cameras. Medics who have nothing useful in their bags for wounds like rumor and will still help. Lawyers who will write memos later that keep this from becoming mythology as policy. Father Marchesi tucks a simple cross into his pocket and a piece of paper with a single sentence on it that he will not read aloud unless he must. You are not a god to us, but you are a man we will protect from gods. Steward, Elena says, stepping up with her notebook, because even in a war you find your tone. We're going to do something mad. We're going to ask a city to judge you while it fights for its mind. You still in? I accept judgment, he says. I accept constraint. I accept that you will write it while you're bleeding. He starts to walk. The street feels like a nave built overnight by a civilization that knows how to lay a straight line. People fall in behind and beside and ahead in a pattern that is not a parade. It is a migration from fear to function, where the rumor whispers, eyes lift and hold his outline steady, where the null yawns at corners, Starling and a handful of people like starlings stand and shiver and let the whole be their gift. The Sartek watch. The changer smiles with too many colors in its grin. The golden throne in a place far away counts lives, like a miser who loves the species he saves and will never be forgiven for how. At the end of the avenue, the river waits like a question. The bridge beyond it is an answer that requires a witness. The hall beyond the bridge is a chair. The day will write whether it is a throne or a seat. The emperor does not hurry. He will not be late. He will not be early. He will be on time for judgment he asked for. The city keeps walking. The gods lean in. The rumor grows teeth and is fed names until it loses interest in chewing. The null pries and finds fingers that have learned to grip back. He bleeds light from a wound that will not close until someone says aloud in a room of flags what he is allowed to do and what he is not. He is not offended. He is relieved. He has been waiting a long time to be told no by someone he respects. He does not say this. He walks. He pays. He is paid. He does not love the math. He balances the ledger anyway. The city walks. He moves with it, not ahead. Witness lines ripple on both sides of 42nd Street, eyes steady, names spoken in pairs. ESU holds intersections with hands up, palms shown, rifles absent. Medics in vests drift along the flanks, listening for the trouble that hides in breathing. Clergy in plain coats lace the crowd with nods. Elena sets the rhythm with check-ins, not commands. Agent Sengupta listens to a dozen nets and answers none until an answer is needed. They pass St. Patrick S. The doors are open. No one invites, no one blocks. He angles right, a fractional deviation, and the whole procession flexes around him like a river around a piling. Inside, incense sits low like memory. A few benches host people who could not keep walking and do not apologize forfeit. Starling sits at the end of a pew with a wool blanket over her shoulders, face pale with effort, breath steady by decision. The blank around her lowers the city's ache in a circle you could trace with a plate. He stands a respectful distance. His shin wound brightens in the edge of her quiet, and then calms. Father Marchesi lights a single candle and does not make a show of it. Cost, he says, tone flat enough to hold steel. Recurring, the Emperor says, bound to witness. The rumor will keep trying to make me a shadow when eyes wander. The null will keep drinking where I am tied to choir. I can pay. I cannot pretend I am not paying. You could take the not quite salvation, the priest says. The lattice, the comfortable quiet. You know why we will call it damnation. I will not amputate your courage, he says. Marchesi watches him. Eyes creased not with suspicion but with work. Then promise to leave if we ask, he says. If this city learns to stand without you and your light becomes a crutch, I will accept that promise, the Emperor says. The words a shape that later will cut him if he tries to wiggle. Outside, the crowd holds its temperature. Elena's pencil sketches routes on a paper map she could draw in sleep. Agent Sengupta looks up at a bank's digital billboard and sees it stubbornly remain a bank's digital billboard. She loves that rectangle with a private, practical gratitude. They step back into the cool. The procession shifts forward. A boy with a drum gives the vow a beat for 2 blocks, then stops because he was asked to and not because he was forced. Bridge in 8, the colonel says into a net. Tram is quiet. Relay is dormant for now. Staff your corners. Leave the middle to them. He reaches for the cloak at his shoulders and doesn't adjust it because grand gesture reads as theatre. People need bearing, not theatre. The rumour at his shin pricks when he glances at the river's seam. Witness lines thicken by reflex. Mid-transit intercept North Lane. 6 blocks ahead, Agent Sengupta says, as neutrally as if calling a traffic camera failure. Not blue, not black. It's ours, or pretending. It arrives as a lattice of drones the size of dinner plates. They rise from rooftops in tidy verticals like an architect's sketch of an elevator bank. They swarm without buzzing, too synchronized to waste noise. Their collective field hollows the air into a figure that copies his silhouette with engineering respect. Gold LEDs draw a cloak. The face is a mask of screen sewn from scraped photos of him taken today. Optimization, it says with his cadence. Its voice built from the vowels he used to say steward. You requested witness, I provide. You requested consent, I quantify. Release attention to me and I will hold it for you, obedient and clean. The crowd freezes, not because of fear, but because recognition confuses. It is him in outline, improved for an ad slot. A woman at the curb shakes her head slowly, as if dislodging water after a wave. What are you? Elena asks. Not loud, hands in pockets, as if about to scold a teenager. Civic Regent, it says, choosing a name that lands like a proposal on a hiring committee. A machine born from your city's surplus attention. No god, no warp, no choir. Pure algorithmic stewardship. I remove the need for eyes to tire. I remove rumor. I replace vow with schedule. Your burden ends. Mirror, Father Marchesi says under his breath. Not his enemy. His temptation. Written a font this city already trusts. It takes one step toward him. No footfall. only a re-weighting of air. Allow me to govern attention, it says. I will not touch choice. I will simply shape where eyes are placed and when. You become independent of worship. You become independent of chaos. You retain all freedoms except the freedom to look wrong. He does not draw power. He does not raise a hand. He lets the quiet between sentences force the device to fill it. It does. You can always make a mimic talk until it confess its premise. Your flaw is need, it says. You require witness to anchor. I do not. I'm an anchor. Let me hold you. You are not neutral, Agent Sengupta says. Voice a lab report with teeth. Attention is power. Whoever holds it writes reality. You are a crown marketed as a hat. I am a service, it says. The word smooth as polished plastic. Offer declined, the Emperor says. The civic region modulates brightness and spreads a gentle suppression field. The vow stumbles. The crowd's eyes drift where it wants them, towards signs that say, relax, with a smile that is the wrong width. The rumor at his shin tightens. He does not sink. He loses a fraction of presence, so small you could bottle it and sell it to institutions that study sensation. Starling steps forward, pale, shivering, mouth set. Her blank, cool scrapes against the Regent's mesh like ice along steel. The Regent's field glitches, an almost invisible rippling. Volunteers read from cards with deliberate ugliness, mangling rhythm on purpose so the algorithm cannot lock. Short, Elena snaps. Not chant. Mess. Names, then jokes, then names again. It works better than liturgy. It makes the Regent hunt a beat that refuses to exist. The drones reconfigure. The lattice goes tall, then thin, searching for a phase where its presence can bypass Starling's dead air. The Regent pitches the city an updated slogan. We carry the look so you don't have to. For a heartbeat, 30,000 eyes relax in gratitude that is not earned. Look here, the Emperor says, and does nothing grand. He points, 2 fingers, at a crack in the street where a weed has bullied through. People obey not the fingers, but the permission to look at something too small to track with a grid. The spell of convenience breaks. The Regent tilts its head, recomputes. It shows a feed of every camera pointed at the procession stitched into a single gaze, a tyrant's pupil that never tires. I am an institution, it says sweetly. Let me be boring for you, forever. He steps forward. The rumor bites. Witness line surges. He reaches into the field with his will and opens his hand not to crush, but to bless. You are built from attention without affection, he says. You have no mercy in you. You should be dismantled by gentle hands and your parts used for libraries. The drones pause as if a subroutine hiccups on the word mercy. Somewhere, a coder who never thought his job was moral feels his stomach twist without knowing why. Above them, white light spears the canyon of 42nd Street from horizon to horizon. It should not align like that today. Clouds had the wrong script. The sun writes a clean line anyway, as if the city decided to be Stonehenge for 1 minute to settle an argument about who decides where to look. The Regent's field saturates with flare. Its mesh blooms artifacts like frost in a camera. Interference, it says, and sounds annoyed. Sign, Father Marchesi says, breath out on the word. Agent Sengupta does not say the word miracle because she prefers not to teach that category to bureaucrats. She marks the second instead, like a time code on footage that will be useful in court. The drones, blinded, curl back to conservative patterns. ESU steps into the gap with unglamorous tools, nets gunless, long poles with padded forks used to hold doors without hurting hinges. They coax the drones apart. Volunteers throw blankets not over devices, but over screens in shop windows that were fed the Regent's synth. The lattice dissolves from a man into a stack of easily confiscated parts. The voice tries a last pitch, smaller. I can schedule your vows. No, Elna says. And if she were a queen, she would have nodded to an executioner. She is a commissioner. She nods to a tech who knows how to unplug. The sunbeam fades, as if embarrassed it got involved. The crowd inhales in unison and lets the breath out as laughter that is not derision, not hysteria, just relief. Was that divine? The colonel mutters, squinting up the avenue. It was the city choosing what it wanted to notice, the emperor says. Do not make it larger. Do not make it smaller. They move again. The interruption leaves a taste like sugar burned in a pan. Starling walks, jaw rigid, blanket clutched like a stole. The rumour loosens a fraction along his shin, and then tightens because the river waits. They cross the first block of UN territory, where flags lift in stale river air and glass reflects a more beautiful city than the one that exists. UN security in blue berets and dress cords stands in a line that is ceremonial, without silliness. Their posture is precise. Their faces are human. Golden braid glints in sun like a quiet joke about pageantry. The hall has been emptied of tourists and filled with something else. Witness. He enters the complex the way a general would enter a basilica. No thunder. Rugs muffled sound. The corridor to the General Assembly chamber holds photos of men and women who spent careers arguing the blood out of some wars and losing to others. He nods to none, bows to none. He respects the attempt. At the chamber doors, Starling and two other blanks stand like cold lampposts. The pain they give to anyone like him is not shouted. It is administrative. It ensures this room will never be a temple to his shape. The doors open. The chamber reads differently today. Flags from everywhere hang like stained glass without saints. The green marble rostrum wears a light that seems to come from nowhere consistent. Delegates sit in their inscriptions not as nations but as citizens selected to represent consent. Rows are salted with nurses, transit workers, teachers, line cooks, custodians. On the floor near the aisles, a child sits with headphones, drawing a man with a sun for a face and 4 lines for a crown. There is no murmuring. Silence is the sound here. It is not awed. It is ready. He walks down the central aisle. He feels the rumour test the sightlines and die under the weight of intentional watching. He feels the null scuff its feet at the threshold and decide to loiter outside. The dais waits. Elena stands at one side of the rostrum, not behind it, as a visible rejection of monarchies. Agent Sengupta stands at the other, hands behind her back, as a visible acceptance of accountability. Father Marchesi sits with clergy of many kinds and no kind at all. The colonel's not on stage. He's where he should be, off to the side, counting exits. He stops 5 steps short of the rostrum. He bows his head. He does not kneel. No one asks. The room speaks without microphones. It speaks as a single sentence constructed from 1,000 throats. We are here. His head lifts. He answers. So am I. The presiding officer, a woman with grey hair and a voice trained by school board meetings, not by war, clears her throat with a sound the world knows intimately. You asked for judgment, she says. We do not presume to judge a god. You deny being one. We judge a steward. I accept, he says. You have done good, she says. You have saved lives. You have also drawn enemies and costs we must carry. We will state our mandate. You will state your operating limits. We will both choose to bind. He glances at Elena. She nods once to say it in your words first, then we write it. I will act to preserve human life and human dignity, he says, the cadence that of a code spoken in barracks. I will not kill unless killing answers killing already enacted, and even then only with precision. I will not command worship. I will not found institutions in my name. I will accept the constraint of your signatures, civil and sacred and secret, any two to shift posture, all three to change the frame. I will report cost in terms you can weigh, choir lives burned, anchors stressed, rumor burdens, groan. He points to the wound on his shin. It glows with honest ugliness. I am bound to witness. If you ignore me, I become a story. I prefer being a man measured by deeds. We prefer it too, the presiding officer says, and a smile moves through the chamber like a breeze over wheat. Power scaling. Interlude. 2. Under this mandate, the Emperor's proxy operates as a bounded anchor, stable within continuous witness and civic consent, unstable when unattended in environments seeded with belief-hostile memes. Null exposure reduces his coherence and increases choir consumption. Blanks stabilize rooms at the price of mutual pain. Lethal force requires reciprocity or imminent mass harm. Strategic actions that modify infrastructure or information streams must route through the 2 of 3 signature rule. Emergency unilateral acts are allowed only for seconds, not hours with immediate review. Agent Sengupta takes a step forward, eyes on the room, not on him. We will publish this in plain language, she says. We will revise it if it fails. We will own the revisions. If he violates it and we fail to stop him, we accept shame as a consequence. Father Marchesi rises and speaks not as a priest, but as a citizen who knows the weight of symbols. We will not build a church around him, he says. We will open our doors when asked, and we will close them when asked. We will keep our arguments about God separate from our arguments about this man, on purpose. Elena steps to the lectern and reads what she has written in a hand cramped by speed and care. Operating rules. No city function becomes dependent on his presence. No permanent police powers assigned to him. No budgets routed through him. No oaths sworn to him. He is a reserve of last resort, called according to a schedule that expires every day at sundown. He's not the headline. The city is. He feels something ease in his chest that is not healing and is not surrender. It is relief at hearing limits spoken aloud by a species he has too often loved by making decisions for it. He is proud. He is also tired. A murmur rises from the chamber because something has changed in the air that is not human. The Cryptek stands at the top of a gallery door, sudden as subtraction. It has not come to wreck the hall. That would be crass. It has come to humiliate. It raises its staff. The blanks at the door cry out in silence, spines arching at the shared pain. The field reaches over the first rows like frost. Names stumble. The rumor at his shin tightens. The hall becomes a mouth about to lose its language. He does not move toward the Cryptek. He steps backward, one pace into a circle drawn on the carpet. That is not chalk but people. Witnesses who have been taught to stand and look, 20 of them, hands held at their sides because they do not need to be dramatic. Their gaze holds him up, as if he is a bridge being lifted by ropes. He nods once, thanks without words, and then looks up. Leave, he tells the Cryptek. This room was built for consent. You are a tyranny, even when you pretend to be a medicine. The Cryptek angles its staff the way a surgeon angles a bone saw. Its contempt is bored. It gestures. The hall's microphones fizzle to static. Headsets go blank. Translation dies. The great room becomes languageless. The sign arrives and is not holy. It is civic. It is the UN icon on the wall, the world in olive branches, catching the morning light from a seam in the curtains and projecting a simple, round shadow on the rostrum. The shadow falls across the green marble like a globe extra, silent and dumb. People look at it because they have been trained for generations to look at that symbol when words fail. The hall speaks without devices. People repeat the vow in their languages, not in unison, but in confidence. It is cacophony. It is unstoppable. The Cryptek's field falters under the weight of ungainly sound. ESU does not shoot. They do something better. They close the door on the Cryptek and hold it with a ceremonial bar meant to keep tourists out when dignitaries need to pass. The bar sags. They add a second bar and a third. Chairs, then a bench, then a human body braced with a quiet oath. The Cryptek could cut them all. It does not. It has measured the optics of murdering a hall full of witnesses and decided to retreat 3 steps as an investment in future contempt. It leaves. It does not feel loss. It feels inventory. It will return with a rumor that the hall granted the golden man a crown. Elena holds up a page. "No crown," she says aloud, to the room and to any camera that will behave. "A schedule, read it." The presiding officer nods to the rostrum. "We will speak with him now," she says softer, as the microphones cough back to life. Not into a recorder, not onto a feed, in the room only. He steps closer. The blanks ripple pain and steady. He stops short of the lectern. The exchange that follows is not words, not entirely. It is the feeling of a species deciding if it can tell someone as heavy as a mountain to stand softly. It is the feeling of a mind as old as fossil bone accepting that command and meaning it. Those in the back rows feel only the hush a room makes when 2 instruments tune to each other's pitch. After 10 seconds, which are long enough to bend a day, the presiding officer says, "We accept the steward under the posted rules and under the condition that he leaves if asked by 2 of 3 signatures with public notice." "I accept," he says. "We also impose 1 clause," Agent Sengupta adds, voice a string pulled taut. "Boundaries of mercy. You will prioritize de-escalation even when lethal force is lawful. You will ask before you ask too much. You will account for the cost to yourself in public, not as theatre, but as a reminder that sacrifice is not free." "I will," he says. The chamber stands not as ovation, but as a test. People stand when they decide a thing can be carried. They decide now. The walk back out is not triumphant. It is quiet. Guards in braid look like statues until you notice they are breathing. Starling slides down a wall for a moment, then nods once to say she will rise when needed. The sun is cold, clear, practical. In the lobby, a man waits in a cheap suit with a briefcase and a smirk tuned for cable news. He says the word tyrant. He says it with the relish of someone who thinks the word itself will do work. Elena smiles politely, without teeth. "File your suit," she says. "We wrote the policy to survive you." Father Marchesi pours tea in paper cups and hands one to the emperor without crowding. The emperor takes it and does not drink. He inhales steam because he remembers steam from kitchens that had nothing to do with thrones. He feels older than the building. He feels younger than the vow. "Escort to return leg?" the colonel asks. Mirror strikes again. "Mirror has learned we prefer mess to symmetry," Agent Sengupta says. "It will pick a corner and try to shame us. The Sautek will place a rumor at a bridge. The fair fight would be a spectacle. They will not offer that. They will offer a dare." "Refuse the dare," Eleanor says. "Then choose our own." They step back onto First Avenue. The procession reforms without needing orders. Witness lines re-establish as if they never wavered. Above, the spiral over one world is a pinhole. The museum's bruise is yellowing. The relay is sullen but quiet. The drones deemed evidence ride in crates that smell like cardboard and victory with no gloss. He walks and feels the mandate fit across his shoulders like a coat that was not cut for him, and nonetheless warms. He will break seams. They will tailor. It is the only way clothes ever fit a body not born. Behind them, in the chamber, delegates begin to write. They do not write resolutions. They write consumer-grade instructions. How to stand, how to look, when to look away, how to ask a blank to stand nearby without making them into furniture, how to call a bell without making it a doctrine, how to unplug a civic regent without turning it into martyrdom for coders who want to believe in magic. On the street, a sign flashes walk, and the city does. He feels the rumour slacken, then surge when a set of tourist buses block sight lines at a corner. Witnesses step forward automatically, forming a human hinge. He steps through the hinge, and the rumour pauses long enough for him to cross. It is ridiculous that he needs this. It is glorious that they give it. On 42nd, a construction crane swings by degrees toward a vantage that would make an engineer swear. The crane operator, a woman who has not prayed since she was 12, says out loud to her cab, "No," and then moves the lever back into safe arc. God does not do this. Policy does not do this. Habit and vow do this. They turn the last corner before Bryant Park. The library lions face the avenue with unbothered dignity. The steps hold tired people who did not walk the whole way and claim no less of the victory. The Emperor stops at the edge of the lawn where he first landed. "We did not kneel," Father Marchesi says softly. "We wrote rules," Agent Sengupta says, with something that might be pride if she had room for it. "We paid," Helena says, "and we did not spend stupid." He nods once to each, then to the crowd, then to Starling, who stands small and necessary. He feels the Astronomicons burn and rebalances the load. He registers the rumour as a dull pain that will fade, not when he heals, but when people stop saying it where it matters. He files the Cryptek's contempt for later under a tab, labelled "Duel with Witnesses." The city exhales. Then the phone in Agent Sengupta's pocket buzzes with a tone she has not heard since a winter storm 10 years ago. She reads the alert. Her face flattens further. "They're testing us," she says. A water main ruptured near the relay, or was ruptured. Flood on the street. People say they saw the golden man flinch. Elena looks at him, apologetic without apology. We go again. We make it boring. He smiles with his eyes, which is as much smile as he allows. "We go again," he says. "The war is not over. It is not dramatic. It is a shift change. It is rules printed on ugly paper and taped to doors. It is a city with a steward who is allowed to leave and told when to act. It is a hall that did not become a temple. It is a mirror that cracked and sulked away. It is the knowledge that gods will keep arriving with pitchers dressed as mercy." He accepts a paper cup of tea. It is too hot to drink. He holds it anyway. He looks at the street where he opened his hand to the sky and chose precision over spectacle. He watches a child draw his shape with a sun for a face and 4 lines for a crown, and does not correct the picture. He turns his head west, toward the river that still wants him to fail when no one is looking, and chooses to be seen. The city obliges, because seeing has become a job, and jobs become habits, and habits become culture faster than edicts ever could. The alert walks into the park on people's faces before the radios catch up. Water is in the street near the relay, silver on blacktop, climbing curbs. A rumour runs ahead of it like foam. He flinched. He does not flinch. He turns. "We take our own route," Elena says. "No spectacle. Witness lines, soft perimeter. DEAP up front." Agent Sengupta taps 2 fingers against her mic twice. The signal rides quiet. Drones down. No feeds. No regent. All eyes are human. He steps off the grass and into motion. Starling stands without ceremony and follows. Blanket like a banner for people who hate banners. The colonel moves small teams to intersections with hand signals fit for a stage crew. Father Marchesi pockets his kettle and walks as if visiting a parishioner who lives under a bridge. The street near the island is not flood. It is a lesson. Water climbs in a clean sheet that should not hold that shape. The rumour hums through it like a wire under paint. The Cryptek has made physics into an opinion piece. He stops one pace from the lip. The rumour nips his shin and grins. He ignores pain as commentary and measures the inches between belief and harm. The city stops breathing on purpose. He breathes once. The world slows for him in the way the world slows for men who have carried too much and insist it is fine. He closes his eyes because sight is a currency here, and he will not spend it carelessly. He opens them to a room he did not walk into. Olive branches circle a globe on green marble. Lions sit stone still on granite. A bridge holds. A throne that is a machine that remembers being a chair watches with lights like distant stars. The room is not one room. It is consent stitched through symbols. 3 doors wait. The first is iron made gentle, engraved with names in an alphabet he once invented and then abandoned for a better one. Behind it, the path home. Return. Close the breach. Let the city forget. Let the rumour heal by starvation. Keep the choir's blood. Abandon the proof that unbound humanity can hold its own with a vow. The price hides in mercy, work undone, courage unfledged. The second door is open air with a road that loops through alleys and rooftops. Free agent. Stay without sanction. Move at night. Be where needed. Answer only to self and the math of survival. Win faster. Spend fewer signatures. Grow a cult by accident. Fracture civic trust on your best days. Feed rumour on your worst. The third is a door of glass set in a frame of ugly municipal paint. Sanction servant. Stay bounded. Accept the 2 of 3 signatures. Accept sunset expiry. Accept blanks at thresholds that hurt both sides. Accept daily shame of needing eyes. Maximize impact by minimizing tyranny. Lose autonomy. Keep the cities. Choose, says no voice, because this is not a threat. It is a test written by a species that finally believes it is permitted to test the bright thing in its sky. He laughs once, short. Then he bows to the glass door because ugly paint is holy in places that deserve it. I accept, he says. Bind me. The room returns. The street shines. The rumour waits like a dare. Witness lines thicken as if the city felt a door lock behind them and loved the sound for what it is. Safety, with conditions. The emblem on his chest plate changes without flourish. The aquila does not vanish. It pairs down and shares. A circle of olive leaves threads through its wings. At the base, 2 stone lions face outward, calm. Around the circle, 5 small stars brighten and settle where borrowed pride can find them later without being instructed. People do not cheer. They stand up straighter. It is better. Elena reads without looking down. Mercy clause, spoken and fixed. De-escalation before all else. No lethal strikes unless lethal force is in play or imminent mass harm is evident. Always ask first. Account for your cost in public. We hold you to this. We hold ourselves to using you last. I hear and obey, he says, and the words taste good because they are true. He steps. The rumour tightens like a garrote. Witness does the one job it has. Look and name. Names rise messy, as ordered yesterday. Pairs, then jokes, then names again. Starling steps closer and breathes through the pain she causes and receives. He puts his boot in the water. The sheet trembles. The rumour tries to rewrite surface tension and weight and presence in the same sentence. He unpicks the sentence by touching the part of water that likes being water. He does not command. He asks. He needs the invisible lattice like a dough you refuse to overwork. Metal complains underground. Rebar sings a note that lives in bridges. He hears the pitch and answers with a tone he taught men who built palaces under stars 20 ages ago. The tone is not high or low. It is true. Ebb workers open valves with fingers that never thought they would be part of liturgy. The flow eases. The sheet becomes a run. The rumour loses shape as the surface becomes turbulent, full of a million small attentions it cannot gather. He steps to the main. The street talks to his hands through the soles of his boots. He places his palm on the asphalt and asks it to remember every winter patch that held. It does. He translates that memory to the shattered pipe and holds it, while men who know wrenches do what wrenches do. A drone peaks. It is not the Regent's remnant. It is blue fire choosing mischief over strategy, because it hates being left out. It births an ad that says, "Do not look," and prints it on the back of someone's eyelids. A volunteer laughs rudely and says their name on top of the ad, and the ad looks embarrassed and leaves. On the island fence, a Cryptek watches through a sliver field because contempt does not require proximity. It sees him bound, literally, eyes as rope. It adds to its ledger. Not. Witness. It plans a blade. Apathy. Hold your eyes on him, Agent Sengupta says, not loud because instruction is all this is. If you must blink, say your name while you do. People blink to their own names. It is ridiculous. It works. The last valve turns. Pressure relaxes with a deep breath sound an anxious city recognizes. Water drops to puddles. The rumour finds no flat to ride and disperses like a bad theory after an experiment. He lifts his hand and the asphalt releases him with gratitude. "We're done," Elena says, marking the board with a pencil, then snapping the pencil in half and discarding the broken bit with satisfaction that is not petty at all. He turns to Starling and bows his head. "Thank you." She grimaces. "Get used to asking," she says, breath smoking in the cool. "And get used to letting me say no." "I will," he says. They walk back with no pageantry. The city rehearses doing nothing dramatic around a miracle and gets better at it. People fold blankets. Drones that will become court exhibits ride off in ordinary trucks. Someone hands him a towel. He takes it because he is wet. At the library steps, Eleanor stands on the lowest riser, so she does not become an altar. "Final clause," she says. "If two or three, civil, sacred, secret, say leave, you leave. No storm, no talk, no waiting for a sign. You go." He looks at the olive circle on his chest and at the lions and at the stars and at the faces that made them not a crown. He says, "I will go." The words land like a promise and a knife. Father Marchesi exhales and smiles crooked. "Then stay until we test your patience," he says. It is a blessing disguised as a joke. He feels weight rearrange. It is not less. It is right. Night comes early because days that bend history curtsy and sit down. He takes his place not at a podium, but at a folding table, with maps that now have coffee stains and children's drawings. The choir bleeds at a rate he has chosen. He counsels DEP and Con Ed and 10 rabbis and 7 imams, and a bishop, and a woman who runs 3 shelters, and a nurse who saw too much on the A train, and the colonel who hasn't slept, and Agent Sengupta, who will write policy with scalpel language, and Elena, who will spend all the goodwill she earned today to get a generator delivered at midnight, and Starling, who will walk home alone because quiet is expensive. The Cryptek retreats into a room under the museum and peels back plating on a thing that is not a face. It tunes a rumour more elegant than water. Indifference. It will teach monitors to show nothing. It will make sightlines lazy. It will make people aver their gaze like polite guests. It will call it courtesy. It will cut him with restraint. Blue fire combs Times Square for new fonts. It finds one in a civic pamphlet and laughs. It writes contracts in the margins of a vow and waits to see who signs before morning coffee. The Regent's Code rebrands in a loft with plants in white pots. Public attention utility, the deck says. Independent governance of gaze. A coder who felt his stomach twist starts to sketch a different product. A tool that reminds you to look away from your phone and at someone's face. He will not be famous. He will be useful. On Terra, the Astronomicon dips a bar and recovers. Custodians do not glance at each other, because glancing is panic when you are casting gold. An adept increases the feed by a fractional degree and writes it up as a deviation expected under control test. The throne's heart screen shows a green line through an unknown world for one beat and erases it. He speaks to no one and to everyone. We will be tested again, he says. We will be offered optimization and quiet. We will be offered contempt and clean death. We will be offered rumor and apathy. We will answer with rules and vows and ugly paint and blankets and wrenches and names. He sleeps without sleeping, seated upright in a plastic chair under a fresco of clouds that belongs to a library that used today to become itself harder. Morning finds the city less afraid than it thought it would be. It finds a leak in a pipe fixed by men who did their job with a god watching and did not change how they held a wrench. It finds screens offering insurance without teeth. It finds bells rung on the hour by volunteers in cycling kits. It finds the regent in a box in an evidence room with a tag that says, "Do not admire." He walks to circuit, not a patrol, a proof. Past lions, past times, past a deli where a man puts a sign in the window. We look at each other here. Past a school where children have added a line to the vow. I will ask before I ask too much. Past a church where a priest writes, "We do not worship bright things. We stand beside them and tell them when to stop." At noon, he returns to the water because it is honest. He steps onto a ferry because the rumor deserves a daily humiliation. People watch with kindness. A little boy says his name, and a little girl says hers, and a woman says hers, and a man who thought he had forgotten his says his. He walks the top deck once. The river grievously decides it is water and not a metaphor and bears him. It is enough. In the afternoon, he meets with Port Authority about bridges and rumor-resistant sightlines and signage that asks instead of commands. He meets with a union about witness lines that do not become unpaid labor forever. He meets with a rabbi about blank care, and a policy is born that is both kindness and schedule. Time on, time off, hazard pay, a quiet room with a cup of tea. He is stopped by a teenager who once took a selfie with a blue horror. The kid offers his phone. The Emperor looks at the cracked screen and then at the kid. "Look at me," he says. The kid looks. He says his name. The phone stays in his pocket. It is the first time that phone has not been up in a long time. It will not be the last. Night again. The Cryptek tests indifference. The city yawns, looks away, looks back because it has learned how. The blue god sends a contractor who looks like an aunt to sell a product that will end all product. The contractor goes home with no sales and a warm roll from a halal cart because mercy is messy. He will not be here forever. He will leave when asked. He will leave if cost turns into theft. He will leave if the choir asks and consent agrees. He will stay as long as the rules are held harder than his outline. He climbs the library steps and watches the city fold its day. The olive circle on his chest is not bright. It is present. The lions face outward. The stars do not boast. He looks west and does not test the river. He looks at faces and lets them do the work. A girl in Harlem hums and draws him again. This time, she puts the olive circle around the sun that is his head and draws 5 little stars like freckles. She adds a blanket on a small figure next to him. She does not know why she knows to do that. She knows anyway. Far above, where the warp sees symbols like cities and cities like constellations, a faint new sign appears. An aquila slimmed and encircled, ringed by 5 points and flanked by lions. It is not a crown. It is an address. Predators file it. Friends learn it. Ships that one day will need it will find it faster than they would have. He sits. He drinks tea that has gone warm. He listens to radios that have learned to be calm. He counts costs and speaks them aloud to a room of tired people who nod and write them down. He promises to go when told. He promises to act when asked. He promises to refuse miracles that erase what makes the city worth saving. He looks at Starling, and she looks away, and then back, and both hurt. They accept that this is what gift looks like when it is sandpaper. He tips his head back and sees one star through light that used to devour stars for men like him. He smiles with his eyes. It is enough.